open it. Alright. This is Fluttershy Me. It's by a guy named BioBoy619. Act 1, A New Kind of Love. My life was nothing short of the most... Who just left? Okay, sorry. I will start again. My life was nothing short of the most boring life in existence. Okay, maybe that's a bit much. I shouldn't say the most boring life in existence, but it was pretty damn boring. It was depressing how boring it was. Look at me. I'm already getting ahead of myself. Let's start over. Okay, so I guess it'd be unfair of me to say my life was nothing but misery and boredom. I lived a basic lifestyle like every other senior in high school, for the most part. I had a family that loved me, friends that adored me, so it's not like I was lonely or anything. My girlfriend status was, sadly, single. No one to love, unfortunately, but that didn't bother me much. Usually after my days at school, I would just go home and play video games or listen to music. Assassin's Creed and rock and roll every day, baby. In other cases, I would stay after school for drama or music rehearsals. Those were often some of the most liveliest times of my life. If none of that was happening, I'd be either hanging out with my friends or watching My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. Yeah, I'm a brony. Deal with it. So you're probably wondering why the fuck I thought my life was so practically messed up in my eyes. Well, I guess you could say I suffered from an unwanted but ever-attacked enlightening epiphany. At some point in the middle of my junior year, I realized that life was, quite simply, nothing but work. Allow me to explain. From the moment you are born into the world, you have to work. You may not realize it fully, but you are working. As a baby, you work to grow up. In elementary school and high school, you work to get good grades and to mature yourself. In college, you work to prepare yourself for the harsh realities of the real world. And in that cruel, real world, you work just to sustain yourself in a seemingly hopeless attempt to make your life worth something. Work. That's all it is. And it's bullshit. Once I came to this realization, I drove myself down a dangerous path. My life was driven into the same shit, different day scenario, and not at all in a good way. But it wasn't bad enough to drive myself into depression. I wasn't cutting myself just for attention, or hoping to end my life because I had a different outlook on the world. I just wasn't really happy anymore. Times I spent with my friends often cheered me up, as we always did crazy, ridiculous things. And if not my friends or my drama and music rehearsals at school, or the copious amounts of hours spent on video games and music, my greatest source of happiness in my life was My Little Pony. Why did you just DM me? Oh. Every single time I watched that show, I smiled and laughed and enjoyed myself. It was almost painful to watch that show, beautiful as it was. I began to dream of waking up in that world, seeing the bright colors around me, seeing the bright, cheerful faces of the ponies, especially Fluttershy. She was my favorite. I loved her to pieces. She was just so adorable and innocent and cute. It drove me insane sometimes how badly I wanted to just cuddle with her. I had actually bought for myself a Fluttershy plushie. My mother and sister didn't judge me. They were actually accepting of the fact that I liked the show. At night, I would hold that Fluttershy so closely and tightly that it seemed like the head might pop off at any moment. If only it could have been the real Fluttershy. That was my greatest wish, to be able to be with the real Fluttershy. And one Friday night, I got my wish. It was a normal Friday. Fridays were like blessings in disguise. Fridays meant that the dreadful week was finally over and that the glorious weekend had arrived. 2 beautiful days of nothing but dicking around with my pals. Being a senior and having a license was awesome. So as the final bell of the day rang, I made my way to my locker, told my pals I'd meet up with them over the weekend, and made my way over to my car. I drove home, eager to throw my backpack onto the floor and just drop dead in my bed for a while. I'd listen to some music and maybe play some Assassin's Creed. I was close to home. I was only a few blocks away, but as I turned the corner onto my block, something big caught my eye, and I mean that literally. A dumpster had been placed on my block next to one of the houses. Luckily, my street was wide enough for it. Otherwise, a lot of people would have been quite pissed off. The only reason this thing caught my eye as much as it did was because it wasn't there in the morning. But really, it was nothing. I thought nothing of it as I pulled into my driveway and headed inside. Friday also meant another thing. Typical teenage white boy behavior here, but Fridays meant pizza. Usually when my mom got home from work at 5, she'd have 2 or 3 slices for me. I always loved that. And on this night, I was actually going to head over to my best friend's house. Thankfully for me, my buddy lived relatively close to me, so I could walk to his place. However, this made me realize something. As I was deep into a replay of Assassin's Creed 4, The Black Flag, I'd have to walk past that goddamn dumpster. I didn't know what it was, but that dumpster wouldn't get out of my mind. I rubbed it off with some good old Crown Empire, followed by some classical Disturbed. My music was the one thing that could get my mind off anything, the entire world if need be. I soon heard my mother pull up in the driveway, and I could almost smell the pizza. I met her at the door and greeted her with a kiss on the cheek. We exchanged a short conversation, and soon enough I was devouring my pizza while drinking a not-so-healthy glass of iced tea. The perfect combination. Some may argue soda. I prefer ginger ale, but I'd grown attached to the pizza iced tea combo. My mother told me she'd been all night out with some of her friends, and that I could have my buddy over if I wanted. We usually opted to stay at his place, but on occasion we'd chill at my house. I nodded to my mom as I headed into the TV room and sat down with my food. As I finished up, I took my dishes into the kitchen, put them in the dishwasher, and threw on my hoodie. It was chilly that day, just as February nights tend to be. My mom protested me for to put on a coat, but I said, nah. She rolled her eyes at me and I laughed as I headed out the door. Saying goodbye, of course. I read that wrong. However, I'm not going to reread it. I popped in my headphones and turned on some Nine Lashes as I made my way down the block. I listened to one of their softer songs, but my enjoyment was quickly interrupted as I passed by the dumpster. I stopped for a moment next to it. Pausing my music and removing my headphones, my eyes began to scan over it. There was nothing out of the ordinary. It was just an ordinary dumpster. I shrugged and continued on my way. And then I heard a soft whining. I stopped in my tracks and looked around. I thought maybe someone was nearby walking a dog. There was no one in my sight. My gaze returned to the dumpster. I raised a curious eyebrow, but shook my head and continued on my way. And then I heard it again. Now I was getting peeved. Where was it coming from? I had to know. My curiosity got the better of me as I hastily stomped over to the dumpster. I peered inside and saw nothing but a few pieces of run-down furniture and a bunch of dumb old knickknacks. I started to think that maybe there was a little squirrel in there or something. But then I realized how stupid that sounded. Squirrels don't whine. And that's when I saw it. It looked like a few strands of hair. They were pink. And then I saw the color of cream-like yellow. It looked like fur all over this creature's body. And that's when I saw it move. It was breathing, shivering from the looks of it. I had no idea what the hell it was. No, that's a lie. I knew exactly what this was. I just didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. But I slowly began to accept the fact for what this thing was. But a part of me still couldn't believe it. There was absolutely no way on earth that this could be here. No way she could be here. And that dumpster, buried beneath all the unwanted junk and trash of some random family on my block, was Fluttershy. To say I was surprised to see her here would be an understatement. I hadn't the slightest clue why she was here, but weirdly enough, that thought didn't cross my mind at the time. What I was thinking about was how furiously she was shivering. No doubt she was cold from the brisk air of the night. I had to get her somewhere warm. But first, I had to get her out of there. So I had to start somewhere. Hi there, I softly spoke to her. In the blink of an eye, her head shot up, and her ears spread wide open. She looked at me in pure fear. Just as quickly as her head had gone up, it went back down, huddled beneath her forelegs. She was whimpering. I was trying to suppress my brony urges, but she was so damn cute and adorable.
Whoa!
I continued to press on. Hey, it's all right. I just want to help you, I said. She whined again, almost making me cry. Please don't hurt me, she whimpered. My heart was melting. No, it had already melted. Even in the chilling cold of the night, I just knew it. Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you. I promise, I said, sounding as reassuringly as humanly possible. "You're cold, aren't you?" I asked. I saw her head nod a bit. I was about to continue when I heard a car down the road. It was my mother. She was already headed out. Perfect timing. I looked back at Fluttershy. "Why don't we get you out of there? It's only going to get colder tonight. I'll keep you safe. I promise." I saw her look up, and I reached a hand in towards her. She jerked back a bit, no doubt still scared out of her mind. But shortly after, she began to inch towards me. She managed to get all the junk off her, revealing her entire self to me. "No, not like that, you fucking creeps." I didn't really have any premonition of how she might look like in real life, but let me say that she was as beautiful as you could imagine. What was weird, though, was she looked younger than she normally does in the show. Perhaps about as old as she was in episode 23 of My Little Pony Season 1. She was even barren of her cutie mark. But honestly, that wasn't important at the moment. What mattered was me getting her inside and out of the cold. Luckily, my sister was away at college, so I would have the house to myself. It'd be tough to hide Fluttershy and keep her secret, but I'd manage it. My hand was still reaching out towards her. She seemed so nervous, but soon enough, she placed a hoof in my palm. She was so soft, it was like I was touching a cloud. I pulled her out of the dumpster and held her in my arms. She struggled a bit, so I put her on the ground. She shivered some more, so I quickly removed my hoodie and wrapped her up in it. Then I picked her up and caressed her in my arms. Again, she struggled a bit, but she quickly relaxed and curled up in my embrace. You can't even comprehend how hard I was trying not to scream out like a little girl in pure joy. I then looked around to make sure no one had seen anything. I was in the clear, so I headed back home, Fluttershy resting peacefully in my arms. There were a lot of things on my mind at that moment, but she rested her chin on my arm. All those things didn't seem to matter. I looked down at her for a moment and felt a warmth spread throughout my body. It was something I hadn't felt in a long time, and I began to wonder what I'd just gotten myself into.
That was worse than I expected, to be honest. I don't know, it's just kind of creepy.
How's my voice acting?
It was a 10 out of 10.
Awesome. That's all I care about.
This was truly the most beautiful fanfic I've ever heard. Now on to episode 2.
It's
Please.
called Chapter 2.
I do
Alright,
not
yeah.
care.
How long is it? Ah, well. I don't have anything else to do. Alright, this is Chapter 2, Act 1, Chapter 2. What the Okay.
What do you mean Act 1?
Alright, here we go.
What
As
do
I
you
entered
mean?
my home... Please! Please! Hold on, somebody pinged me. Alright, never mind. It's not important. Alright, here I go. As I entered my home with the little Fluttershy, I felt a wave of heat hit my body. This was probably because of how cold I had been after removing my hoodie to cover Fluttershy. It was relieving to know my mother wasn't going to be home all night. This was going to be quite a task, hiding Fluttershy and all. I figured I could pass her off as my plushie. Once I got rid of it, that is. As I unwrapped Fluttershy and set her on the floor, she took in her new surroundings. She seemed confused, but I couldn't blame her. She had no idea where she was. I could see she had a look of concern on her face. I told her to follow me into the basement. The windows on the main floor of my house were a bit revealing, and I didn't want her to be seen. I started for the basement door, but realized she wasn't following. I turned around to see her sitting on the floor, her head down, and her face in tears. I stared for a moment, but I quickly came to my senses. She was afraid. Truly afraid. She didn't know where she was, and she certainly didn't know who I was. Hell, I found her in a fucking dumpster. How had she gotten here? Why was she here? Nothing I could think of made sense. So in an effort to comfort her, I knelt down beside her and brushed her mane with my hand. She looked up at me, her eyes soaked with tears. There. It's all right. You're safe here. I promised I wouldn't hurt you. So I'm not going to break that promise. I won't let anything or anyone hurt you. You can trust me. My words definitely worked in comforting her. She stopped crying and leaned her head into my chest. I continued to brush her mane with my hand. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Her innocence was pure. She was downright adorable. And she was flat out cute. She looked at me with her tear-filled eyes. If it's not too much trouble to ask, could you carry me? I feel too weak to move, she said. I had no reason to deny her. It's no trouble at all. I almost said her name at the end of my statement, but I quickly stopped myself. Why? Well, if I had said her name, that would seem a little suspicious. I knew who she was, but I couldn't let her know that. It wouldn't make sense to her. I brought her into the basement. On the couch was a blanket I rarely used, mostly because I always wore my hoodie in the house during the winter. I always had the hood on too, unless my mom asked me to take it off. I set Fluttershy on the couch and wrapped her in the blanket. She got comfortable on the couch, resting her head on one of the pillows. I found myself staring at her. I think she was getting a little embarrassed by this, though, so I stopped. I figured now would be as good a time as any to start asking some questions. At least ones that she can answer anyway. So what's your name? I asked. Even though, of course, I knew her name. Like I said before, I couldn't just say her name like I had it memorized. Too creepy for her. I'm Fluttershy, she said, her voice dying down as she was finishing her name. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Just speak a bit louder. You don't have to be afraid. You can trust me. My name's Matthew. Most people call me Matt. She stared at the floor for a second before speaking again. I'm Fluttershy, she said. I swear to you, I wanted to so badly to just squeal at the top of my lungs in that moment. My brony emotions were in high gear, but now was certainly not the time for that. I smiled. Nice to meet you, Fluttershy. I know that all this may seem sudden to you, but like I said, you can trust me. This is one of the greatest moments of my life. You may think that sounds a little overdramatic, that this moment is a little too serious, or maybe even a little sad for it to be great at all, but trust me when I said, this was a moment I would never forget. She stared around the room, scanning the various objects that surrounded her. She seemed interested in my bionicles. Yes, I have those, and I will never get rid of them. While she didn't notice, I took a moment to scan her over. Not in a creepy way. She seemed to be a little younger than me. I had initially thought that she was as old as she was in episode 23, but I started to think that she was a little younger than me, maybe by about 3 years. I was 17 at the time, so I figured she was 14. I had to ask her some questions. Maybe she could shed some light on the situation. Do you know how you got here, Fluttershy? She shook her head in response. I sighed. Well, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you? She thought for a moment. I think. Maybe she was contemplating whether or not to tell me. I'm 14 years old, I think. I'm sorry, but I can't seem to remember much. All I can remember for sure is my friend named Rainbow Dash. Rainbow Dash? My number 2 pony. Next to Fluttershy, Dash was my favorite pony. I found it odd that Fluttershy could only remember Rainbow Dash's name. What actually surprised me a bit more was how spot on I was with guessing her age. Go me! I continued by asking if she remembered where she was from. She couldn't answer that either. I knew, of course. Equestria. A world I could only dream of living in. I tried thinking of some other questions. When I found her, my mind was swimming with questions. Now that I had the chance to ask her, I couldn't think of any. I was so frustrated. I ran my fingers over my eyes, which meant I was getting tired. It was only 9:30 at that point, so I had some time to kill. I was caught off guard when Fluttershy actually asked me a question. What are you? She asked with a hint of concern in her voice. I looked at her for a moment with a confused look on my face. I'm a human. I'm a male? And I'm 17 years old. I'm guessing you're a horse? I felt so dumb asking her questions when I knew the answers already. Pony, she corrected. A Pegasus, to be more precise. I sort of figured she wasn't a great flyer, but I was surprised to see that she knew it too. Hell, I was surprised to see she knew what it was. Although, then again, maybe I shouldn't have been so surprised by that. Stupid me. Do all humans look like you? She asked. I chuckled a bit when she asked this. No, not exactly the same. We have similar features like hands, feet, face, and some other stuff. People just look different from each other. You would have to search for quite a long time to find somebody who looked exactly like me. Males have unique features that females don't have, and vice versa. Does that all make sense? She nodded. Oh, what kind of features? What is it that you have that a female doesn't? She asked. I wore that you might call a confused mixed with dumbfounded look on my face, letting out another chuckle shortly after. Well, there's a... How about I tell you another time? I felt a little uncomfortable discussing this with her. She seemed to understand, though, simply nodding her head in response. By the time the clock struck 11, I had become so attached to Fluttershy, I think the same could be said of her. I was more attached to her than I ever was just watching her on TV. I told her as much about me as I could at that time, but but she couldn't remember much else other than what she had told me. But honestly, I was fine with that. As I started to yawn, she did the same. I think yawning is something in my family that is just contagious. My eyes began to doze off, but before they completely closed, Fluttershy nestled herself next to me, finding comfort from my body heat. She looked up at me and smiled. I smiled back. I had already turned off the light in the room, and I didn't really need to worry about my mom finding out about Fluttershy, since she never really came down into the basement. I hit the recline button on the side of the couch, which surprised Fluttershy a bit, but I quickly calmed her down. Shortly after that, we dozed off and began to sleep. It was just the two of us. It was just Fluttershy and me. Estimated time remaining 2 hours and 43 minutes. Hold on. You guys ping me? Shit posting. 10 out of 10 Ryan. Wow, okay, pedo. It's not me. I didn't write it.
Ryan, that was terrible. That really wasn't great.
I didn't say it was good.
Right, is it lemon though? Is it lemon?
Ryan, you need to
What do you mean by
read
that?
all of it.
Is it lewd?
Ryan,
Does it say like
I don't remember. I think it might be.
Well, we'll have to kick like life out the car.
But bruh, I can't believe it's just straight up pedo though. Just straight up like 14.
How old is like Fluttershy?
She's 14 and the guy is 17.
Goddamn.
It's not too bad, but it's kind of.
I know someone in Discord who did that.
Yeah, it is kind of creepy though. Like the way he words things is weird.
Yeah, I hope it
Like-
doesn't get.
Ryan,
Yeah, comrade.
are you going to finish the entire fanfic?
It's only
You
8 o'clock,
better.
so I guess I could.
10 out of 10.
Okay, do it now.
Really good.
No, I'd rather say 10. All right, yeah. Thank you. I'm actually trying a little bit.
You need to do it so that I can finally start reading Barney Smart on Wattpad.
Yeah, if you ever make a game, I'll be your first voice actor.
No, I mean, no, it's not a
No,
game,
be
it's a-
quiet. Just be
it's a-
quiet.
Okay.
Okay, here I go again. On my own. Going down the only road that I've ever known. Chapter 3.
Here I go again.
What? Chapter 3, Act 1. Chapter 3. I awoke on the basement couch, the light from the sun piercing through the curtains that covered the small windows. In my head, I was asking myself if it was all a dream. I looked down to find Fluttershy still with me. She was wrapped in the blanket, lying under my arm with her head on my lap. I smiled and took in a deep breath. I think my exhale was a little loud because shortly after she woke up, she looked around, yawned, then looked to me and smiled. "Good morning," she said to me, rubbing her eyes with her hooves. "Good morning, Fluttershy. Sleep well?" I asked her. She nodded. "I had the most wonderful dream. You were in it, actually," she said. This came as a bit of a shock to me. We had only met last night, but for some reason, I was in her dreams. Weird, right? Why are you DMing me? Mr. Beta, her age isn't the same in the real show as it is in this pedophile fanfic. He artificially lowered her age and probably artificially lowered his so it wasn't so creepy. But I'll continue now that we've sorted that out. "What was the dream about?" I asked her. As she was about to speak, a confused look adorned her face. I responded with a confused look on my face. "Oh, I'm sorry, but I can't seem to remember. I know you were there, though. I think I was flying, and then you appeared on the ground. You smiling and waving to me. At least, I think that's what it was. Sorry. No need to apologize. I can barely ever remember my dreams, no matter how hard I try sometimes." She perked up and smiled after I said that. I was so happy that it was Saturday. I wouldn't have to worry about anything for the whole day. Unless, of course, my mom dropped some sort of work on my lap. I started to get up from the couch, pushing the recliner inward. Fluttershy got up and started following me, but I quickly stopped her. "Hey, can you just wait down here for a bit? I need to go see if my mother's home. Hopefully she'll be out and you can come upstairs. If she's here, I'll come back down and we'll stay here for a while, okay? She nodded, which told me she understood. I proceeded upstairs. I didn't hear the TV in the kitchen, so that was a good sign. I went into the kitchen anyway to get some food. On the counter, I saw a note left from my mom saying that she would be out for a while, probably until 1. It was 10:30 when I read the note, so I had a lot of time. I yelled downstairs at Fluttershy. Hey, Fluttershy, you can come up. My mom's going to be out for a while, so you'll be fine. All right, she responded. Even though there was a rug floor in the basement, I could distinctly make out her hoofsteps. They were soft, but quite audible. She came up to the kitchen where I had been getting some cereal out for breakfast. She looked at the box of food with a look of confusion. What's that stuff? Is it food? If it's not too much to ask, do you think I could have some? She asked. I let out a small chuckle. Fluttershy, don't worry about asking if it's okay for you to do something. You can have anything to eat that you want, I said to her, hoping I said that as politely as I could. I didn't want to sound like she was annoying. I walked over her with the box of cereal. For those of you wondering, it was Reese's Puffs. Reese's Puffs. Reese's Puffs? Fuck! With a bowl. I set the bowl down, but before I actually poured the cereal in it, I thought about whether or not Fluttershy would be able to eat the cereal. Well, actually, this you can't eat. It's not because I don't want to give it to you. It's just that I'm not sure if it'll agree with your body. I don't want you getting sick, I told her. Oh, that's okay, but, anything else? I thought for a moment. I remember that I had waffles and pancakes in stock. Let's eat, figured one of those must have been alright. We've got some pancakes in the freezer. Hold on, I'll get some for you. She perked up after I said that. I told her that. I got out the pancakes and a plate to put them on. I put 4 pancakes on the plate and put it in the microwave. When they were done, I gave them to her. She looked at them for a moment with a quizzical look. I told her they would be fine. I guess she had no reason to doubt me, so she took a bite out of one. She smiled, which I took as a sign of approval. In turn, I smiled. When she was done with her pancakes, and I with my cereal, I decided to give her a tour of the house. I showed her around the main floor, which included the kitchen, a TV room, dining room, and living room. She liked all the nice furniture and decorative furnishings that adorned the house. She was especially intrigued by the pictures of myself and my family. She asked me some questions about the people I was with. I told her they were my family members, and that they are all very special to me. She smiled at that, which I liked seeing. I then took her upstairs, telling her where my mother and sister's rooms were. As I said before, my sister was in college, so I didn't have to worry about her. I told Fluttershy to stay out of their rooms unless I was with her. Then we proceeded to my room. You could practically call my room a monument to video game, comics, and music, because my room was stocked with so much shit from all 3 categories. I had a figure from every Assassin's Creed game, a replica of Ezio's hidden blade, and a replica of Connor's tomahawk. I had a ton of posters from my favorite bands, Marvel and Assassin's Creed. Along with all that, I had a Master Chief figure, an Isaac Clarke figure from Dead Space 3, and a few of my favorite Bionicle sets. I only wish I had a TV in my room, but my mom never allowed it. Okay, now I feel like I've gone into too much detail about my room. Back to Fluttershy. She gazed upon all the objects and posters that adorned my room. She seemed to actually like a lot of the things, especially the Colonial America flag I had from Assassin's Creed 3 based. She told me how she loved the colors and the Assassin's crest in the center. I honestly figured she would be a little taken aback by these things that I had in my room. She at one point just flat out asked me what Assassin's Creed was. It's a video game franchise. My favorite, actually. Video games are like, well, how do I put it? They're games where you can play with... Wow, I never actually realized how seemingly difficult it is to describe what video games are. Well, I'll just tell you that video games are awesome, but most of the time anyways. Assassin's Creed is one of the best. It's a little violent, though, or rather, really violent. I could show you sometimes if you'd want to see it. She nodded and smiled in response. I smiled back. Then, she actually fluttered up onto my bed and got comfortable on it. Hey, would it be alright if we slept here from now on? She asked me, smiling shyly. I chuckled. Sure, why not? We just can't let my mom see you. Why not? She asked me. Well, she might not be able to understand how a 14-year-old pony wound up in my world and is sleeping with me in my bed. It'd be best if you stayed out of her sight. If she winds up seeing you, though, pretend to be a toy or something. Just don't move. She seemed to understand and nodded her head in response. I was actually quite lucky. My Fluttershy plushie was buried beneath my covers. Underneath my covers. I told myself that I had to put it there in my closet or something at some point. Then I just got to thinking that I could just get rid of it. I didn't need it anymore. I have the real Fluttershy with me now. Do you have some place where I could maybe take a bath? I feel really dirty, she told me. I don't know why I didn't think about that earlier. I found her in a dumpster, so of course she was dirty. I told her I would give her a bath, or rather, a shower. My bathtub was really shitty at actually being used as a bathtub, so it was always just used as a shower. I got her cleaned up and everything, even though cleaning her mane was a bit of a pain. But then again, it was actually very enjoyable. Her mane was incredible to run my hand through, and her fur was so soft. It was as if I was running my hands over the surface of water. As I was cleaning her up, she kept smiling at me, and I was always smiling back at her. And then, as I was drying her off, Fluttershy did something completely unexpected. She looked into my eyes for a moment, and soon after, she was hugging me. I was totally surprised at first, but I quickly returned the hug. And that was the moment that we officially started our relationship.
Oh my god, no! I hurt your
That's
heart.
how love works, guys.
Yeah, that was a bit
You
quick.
just pick up a girl off the street and then take her home and give her a bath, and then
You know,
yeah,
ponies,
she's
come
yours.
on. I'm sure animals don't need much more.
That's hentai, baby.
I'm sure animals don't need too much more.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I think getting a hug obviously means you're dating.
Of course.
Oh, animals will fuck
Oh,
you.
you're being friend zoned. Imagine we got friend zoned by Fluttershy.
Clemmy,
Oof.
Likely.
Clemmy, I need to request that you make various images of Fluttershy.
Fluttershy?
Yes.
Are they toxic?
Okay, right, please continue.
Just look in general, Clemmy.
Okay.
I'm busy.
Darn. Well, look at
Okay.
it.
Dinner time.
When you have time, you should.
I'll just meet them both.
You can still listen, of course, right? I hope so. Okay, well. Estimated time, 2 hours and 31 minutes. Child's Play. Chapter 4, Act 1, Chapter 4. The rest of the Saturday was interesting, to say the least. I had to keep Fluttershy completely hidden from my mother. I practically had to stay in the basement the whole day, and when I'd bring down ludicrous amounts of food, I'd say to my mom that I had a hankering for food. Look out, world. You've got a mastermind on your hands. I just hit my mic. But aside from the nightmare that was keeping Fluttershy a secret, I managed to get through the day. It kind of sucked, too. I had turned down some calls from my friends to hang out, but when I had to eat dinner, I felt guilty for leaving Fluttershy alone as long as I did. 20 minutes, but still. Soon enough, though, the day came to an end, and it was bedtime. Just like I promised, Fluttershy and I slept in my bed that night. Thank the good Lord. Yes, I just wrote that. We did too. I had never really slept in my basement before, and after doing it once, I can only say I would never do it again. It made me ache and stuff. Fluttershy was fine, but she really liked my bed, as did I. Getting into my room wasn't difficult. My mother was already asleep at the time. By the time I went to bed. Again, thank the good Lord. I'm going to stop doing that now. Anyway, I took Fluttershy out to my room from the basement. I placed her on my bed and told her that I would return shortly. I took a quick shower and brushed my teeth before returning to my room. When I'd re-entered, dressed in some colorful Marvel pajama pants, I found Fluttershy flipping through one of my comic books. From the look of it, it was my Civil War comic. The Marvel Heroes Civil War, duh. I smiled as I hung up my towel. What you reading there? I asked warmly, walking over to the bed. I guess she was so lost in the book because I sat down on the bed. She jumped a little and closed the book. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snoop, she squeaked. I laughed and took the book. Don't worry. This is a great comic book. Want me to read it to you? I asked. From behind her hair, I saw her smile, and she nodded. I put the book down on my night table for a moment as I tucked her in. Then I joined her under the warmth and comfort of my sheets and blanket. Getting comfortable, I picked up the book again and opened it. Did you start from the beginning? I asked. No, I sort of just opened it. The characters just looked really nice. Some of them scared me, though, she told me. I nodded and began to imagine her seeing Venom for the short moments that he's in the book. Well, why don't we start from the beginning, huh? She nodded as I turned to the first page. I started to read aloud what was happening on the pages. I tried as best I could to do different voices for each of the characters. My female voice wasn't that strong, and that's saying something, considering I'm an actor. I could practically read it without looking. I had read the book so many times. Civil War was, and still is, my favorite Marvel event story. Fluttershy would continuously stop me and ask questions about who some of the characters were or what was going on. I could tell her most of what was happening, and most of the characters were. Some characters I barely knew, some I knew to an acceptable degree, and some I knew too much about. I was more than happy to explain what I could to her, though. I love talking about comics. I'm a geek. Deal with it! We got about halfway through the story before I found Fluttershy nuzzling my arm. I looked away from the book to see her half asleep, breathing gently as she looked at the book. Is it over? She asked, looking up at me. I smiled. Well, no. We've got 3 more comics to go before the story ends. But you look tired. Do you want to go to sleep? I asked. She shook her head. No. Could you please keep reading? I nodded and continued on. Never had reading through this book been so enjoyable and fun before. Never really had a reason to read aloud before, but it wasn't even that. I was reading a comic book to someone, or some pony to be precise, and Fluttershy was enjoying every moment of the story. This was one read-through I was not going to forget anytime soon. And honestly, every time I read through Civil War, I'd find a new reason to love it again. Once again, I'd found a reason to love this book. As I closed the back cover of the book, completing the story, I looked down at Fluttershy with a tender smile. She looked up at me with a disappointed frown. What's wrong? I asked, my smile fading slightly. Does it have to be over? I want to read more, she said softly. It seemed like she might cry a bit. My smile spread farther across my face. Heh, don't worry. I've got tons of books. We can read all you want, I reassured her, running my hand through her mane. She cooed slightly and smiled at me. I looked at the clock, and it read only 10:30. I looked back at Fluttershy, holding up the book. Want to read more now? I asked. Oh, yes, please, she beamed. It was actually endearing to see how passionately Fluttershy wanted to keep reading. I was so excited. I had found some pony who loved comics almost as much as me, and she had only read 1 book. Wait, before we continue, who was your favorite? I quickly asked her. Oh, I don't know. Maybe Spider-Man? I really liked him. He seemed so sincere and talented, she told me. My heart soared all the way to Venus as she said that. We shared a favorite hero. And who says life ain't good? Okay, another question. Would you like to read another big event comic like this, or some book specifically involving Spider-Man? The question almost seemed like too much for Fluttershy to handle. I chuckled as she pondered which to choose. Well, what do you want? She asked. I laughed and got up from my bed, to her slight surprise. I ran over to my shelf and picked out a Spider-Man book. It was almost too difficult of a choice. I chose the Spider-Man book that got me started on Spidey. It was Brand New Day, Volume 1. Yes, the book is quite controversial, but it's a perfect starting point for those who haven't read anything prior. That was my case. I jumped back onto the bed. Fluttershy was giggling at me as I eagerly opened the book. She could tell just how ecstatic I was to get reading. I wrapped an arm around her and started reading the book to her. Pure Bliss. About an hour later, we were on Volume 3 of Brand New Day. We were both getting tired, but we were determined to complete the trilogy of Spider-Man books before going to bed. But by the time we started the book, Fluttershy had herself around me in a warm hug. I had wrapped my arm around her neck, holding her close. It took me a bit to realize this. We'd just gotten this way without even realizing it. But as I finally closed the back cover of the book, Fluttershy was fast asleep, smiling all the while. I gently got out of bed, put the book back on my shelf, turned off the light, crept back into the cuddle with her. She was still asleep as I whispered to her. Good night, Fluttershy, she nuzzled me as I wrapped an arm around her. I stared up at my ceiling for a moment. Only one thought came to mind. It was just the 2 of us, together. It was Fluttershy and me, the title of the story. Chapter 5, Act 1, Chapter 5. As you can tell, I was already off to a great start with Fluttershy. Sunday was more of the same. Fluttershy and I just hiding in the basement all day from my family and friends. Honestly, I could have cared a whole lot less about that. As I spent more time with Fluttershy, she started to open up more to me. She became less nervous around me, starting to ask for things without hesitation. Mostly she just asked for something to drink or eat, but I was happy to oblige. I did a bit of research on what I could feed her, but as I continued my research, I began to wonder if the biology of an equestrian pony was the same as an earth horse. I decided to play it safe, while at least the same time taking some chances. And wouldn't you know it, everything worked out fine! Sunday night was just the same as Saturday night. Fluttershy and I were just sitting in my bed, reading comics quietly. We read one Spider-Man book before I introduced Fluttershy to the Dark Knight himself, Batman. She didn't like him as much. I was thoroughly disappointed. But beggars can't be choosers, as it were. We stuck to Spider-Man for the night. As Fluttershy fell asleep, I turned off the lights and fell asleep with her in my arms once again. However, all throughout the day, up until the moment I went off into dreamland, something had been nagging at my mind. I just couldn't quite place it. It hit me when my alarm went off the next morning. From my phone, the song Johnny's Revenge by Crown the Empire was playing. The song begins with a demonic carnival-like laughing. Fluttershy awoke with a fearful squeak. Through this, I woke up with the frightened mare with a jolt. I quickly calmed her down, rubbing her mane and holding her in my arms. I assured her that everything was fine. I looked at my phone and quickly turned off the hard rock music that was emanating from it. And then I remembered. I fell back in bed, groaning in annoyance as I facepalmed myself. I looked at my clock, which read 6:45. I then turned to Fluttershy, looking completely pissed off with the current situation. She was still shaking a bit as I regulated my face to a more relaxed look. What was that? She asked, lying down with me. It was my alarm. Sorry about that. Completely forgot that I had school today. I was so caught up in Fluttershy that I had forgotten that I was a high school teenager. I hated being a high school teenager. It kind of blows. Why did it go off? Fluttershy asked me, having finally calmed down. She made her way under my arm, seeking comfort from me, which I was more than willing to provide. I have to go to school today, I answered. I let out another agonizing moan. Shit, I bluntly stated. I could tell that my condition was frightening Fluttershy, so I regulated myself and calmed down. I'm sorry about the alarm, and I'm really sorry that I'm going to have to leave you home alone today, Fluttershy. It nearly killed me to utter those words. What? Why? Can't I come with you? I almost cried as she said that. Fluttershy, I'd love to take you with me to school, truly. But considering you're a pony who talks and flies, sort of, I don't think many people would be understanding as to why you're at my school. Then they might freak out, you know? I'm really sorry. I sat up in bed and wiped my eyes. I stood up and stretched, soliciting a few cracks from my neck. Oh, okay, Fluttershy muttered, her sadness quite apparent. I turned around and looked into her eyes. It seemed like she was about to cry, but I wasn't going to let that happen. I wrapped her up in a warm hug, holding her close, yet not too tightly. Hey, don't worry. I'll only be gone for a few hours. I'll be back at about 3:15. That's not so bad, right? I said, trying to sound as reassuring as I could. She worked up a weak smile and nodded as we released our hug. I went to the bathroom, bringing some clothes with me so I could get dressed. I took my morning piss, got dressed, worked my hair as I normally did for the school week, and re-entered my room. I brought Fluttershy downstairs, seeing as though my mother had already left for work. We had what was now our usual breakfast, eating a little quicker this morning. After we ate, I quickly brushed my teeth and brought Fluttershy downstairs, bringing along some snacks for her. My plan was for her to stay in the basement all day, basically. I set her up with her favorite TV channel, which was Nickelodeon. I told her how to change the channel if she wanted, warning her to steer clear of the Hub network, for obvious reasons. I didn't need to deal with that right now. That would come when the time was right, I figured. I set her up with tons of snacks that she enjoyed, and I even showed her how to play some of the music on my own computer. "Do try?" she questioned. I showed her some of the music on my laptop. I laughed as she said that. Daughtry, I corrected her. Their music is pretty good. You'll enjoy them. I know it. They're not like what you heard this morning. That was Crown the Empire. If you want, you can venture to listen to some of their stuff, but you might not like it as much as I do. Stick to Daughtry, Theory of the Dead Man, 9 Lashes, and maybe even some Red and A Day to Remember. These are just recommendations. I figured I might as well introduce Fluttershy to some amazing music. I wasn't going to taint her mind with the garbage that is mainstream music. To hell with that bullshit. I told her anything I figured was vital for her survival for the next day. I knelt down in front of her and ran my hand through her mane as I often did. She smiled at me happily. Just before I was going to leave, though, she grabbed me in another hug, keeping me on my knees. I, of course, returned the hug, not wanting to let go. I fought to hold on to that hug, but unfortunately, I had to let go. I ran my hand through Fluttershy's mane once more before I turned to walk upstairs and out the door. During the drive to school, my mind thought of nothing but Fluttershy. School was no different. All I could think about during school was Fluttershy. How was she doing without me there? Was she lonely? Was she all right? Had she actually hurt herself? So many thoughts raced through my mind. I couldn't get her off my mind. The day went by pretty fast, though, and being a senior in high school, I had a huge advantage. I had gotten lucky with my scheduling, and managed to get both periods 8 and 9 off, which meant I could go home early. I was so anxious for the bell signifying 7 period's end. As soon as it rang, I jumped out of my seat, ran to my locker, got my things, and drove home. I entered my house, quickly setting my things down, and yelled her name. "Hey, Fluttershy, it's me, Matt. I'm home. Where are you?" I got no response. I went to check downstairs, but the back room light was off. I ran back upstairs, but as soon as I turned to head upstairs, Fluttershy jumped up onto me and held me in a tight embrace. I was caught off guard, but not enough to make me fall on my back. I knelt down, allowing her to stand on her hind legs. I could hear her crying, but I had no idea why. "Thank goodness you're home, Matthew. I was so afraid," she exclaimed. Afraid of what? What happened?" Something came on one of the channels. I didn't think it was so bad, but up until the monsters appeared," she told me. "I was wondering what she could have been watching." "Do you remember what channel that was on?" I asked her. She wasn't crying as much when she first jumped onto me, but she hadn't fully stopped. I think it was channel 231, she told me. Channel 231? AMC for Verizon users. I think I knew what she was watching. "Was it The Walking Dead?" I asked her. She nodded, her tears starting to dissipate. "Don't worry, Fluttershy. It was just a show. Those monsters aren't real," I told her, trying to calm her down. I did indeed tell her that the zombies, or walkers as they are referred to as on the show, weren't real. But at the same time, I did actually believe that someday the zombies would rise. Hey, call me a crazy weirdo. I don't care. A zombie apocalypse would be pretty cool. "I guess I have another channel to stay away from, huh?" she said. I chuckled a bit and told her that she was right about that. She let go of me and took a step back as I just told her to breathe. After about a minute, she was fine. "I got a bit lonely while you were gone. How often is this going to happen?" she asked me. I rubbed my eyes and sighed. "Well, unless I have off from school, every Monday through Friday. Some days I might have to stay late for rehearsals. Sorry, Fluttershy." She looked down and frowned. I then noticed that she had a little bruise on her left front leg. "Hey, what happened here?" I asked her. She looked up, then back down to her leg. "Oh, well, when the monster showed up, it frightened me so much that I jumped and actually started to fly a bit. But I'm such a terrible flyer that I flew right into the wall and hurt my leg." "I'm sorry," she said. "Fluttershy, you have nothing to apologize for. You just got spooked and had a little accident. That's all. If anything, I should be apologizing for not being here. But hey, speaking of flying, how would you like it if I tried to help you learn to fly better?" "Really? But you don't have wings. How'd you teach me at all? I mean, not to say that I don't want to learn, but it's just that I'm not so sure that you could really teach me," she told me. I started to think. How would I teach her? I had no knowledge of flight myself, so teaching her would be pretty difficult. Well, I guess we can just think about that for now. Maybe when we come up with something, we can start practicing. Right now, I'm just hungry. "I need a snack," I said. She giggled after I said that, which made me laugh in return. "There are still some snacks that you gave me from the day downstairs. We can have those," she told me. I nodded my head and brought her down into the basement, and we started snacking on what was left of the food. The rest of the week followed with the same procedure as Monday, except without the whole crying thing when I arrived home. Fluttershy was perfectly fine with staying home by herself by that Thursday, actually. She got used to it pretty quickly. I don't know why, but Fluttershy seemed a bit more, outgoing and open than she was in the show. She seemed more confident in herself. She was, of course, still very shy and kept worrying about little things. But like I said, she just had more confidence. I narrowed it down to me just being who I was. That may sound weird depending on how you've been depicting me thus far, but Fluttershy had changed me, even though we had only known each other for about a week. And I think I was changing her. The routine soon became natural. I would go to school, she would stay home, and when I got home, we would spend the rest of the day together. The first time I had to stay later for rehearsal, she got a little worried, but even then, she got used to that too. Musical stuff ended in April, so she didn't have to worry about that anymore. The rest of my senior year of high school just rushed on by since I had found Fluttershy. Before I knew it, summer had arrived. Shit. Sorry, I opened something wrong. Where is my...
Ryan, you fool. Wait, did you do a massive time skip? Did I hear that right about a time skip?
He did do a few months time skip, I think, and now it's summer after his senior high school year.
When is the lemon starting, Ryan?
Wait, this is a lemon?
It might be. I don't know.
Better not.
I'm just glad you guys are
Friggin'
actually listening, and I'm just
14-year-old.
like not like speaking just to myself. That would be retarded.
Yeah, we're listening, Ryan.
I know. I'm glad.
Well, we'll find out. Don't spoil it.
I don't know. I don't
We'll see.
remember. There's two other there's two other versions of this. There's Tortured Love, which is mature, and there's
I'm sorry,
Without
what?
You. What?
Oh man, we gotta dig into Tortured Love here.
Is that an hour? Is that an hour?
It's
No,
probably
look.
long.
There's another one called Tortured Love, and it's
Well, would
50.
would it be okay if you even read that in this server?
Probably. As long as no admins there.
Probably, yeah. As long as
Also,
there's no silly
Ryan,
add-ons.
how do you know it's mature, Ryan?
It literally told me when I clicked on it. I click on it and it says warning.
Okay,
This is
Ryan.
mature.
So this one isn't weird. This one is
I also do remember this. So yeah.
So this
Sucks
one is
to suck.
wholesome. This one is wholesome.
What? Oh God.
The
I
one
mean-
the one we're reading right now, I don't think.
Damn.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
I guess it's time to change.
It's time to switch.
We'll be like, you silly. Silly.
Wait, are we not
Yeah.
gonna finish it?
Well, I'm gonna keep reading. I just need to pour myself a drink.
You are amazing, Ray. You're the
Thank
best
you.
writer ever.
Yeah, any day to listen to Ryan read a My Little Pony fanfic.
What a better way to spend your Friday night.
Yeah.
It's like 1 a.m.
There's no
yeah.
better way. So I don't know what you mean.
All right. Well, here I almost.
I mean,
Turned
isn't
into
this
an
what
MLP
all
server.
friends do? Is this not what all friends do?
This is what all.
We're friends.
I can say that confidently.
We have to be more than friends to read MLP fan fiction. To each
Oh
other.
man, is this polygamy here?
Yes.
Whoa. Ryan,
Is
what
this
you are,
the
mad at
Ryan
me?
harem?
What?
This is more than just polygamy. This is now a brony community.
Jesus.
Oh
All right,
boy.
all right, be quiet. I'm gonna read the next chapter.
Okay.
Accept it. Accept that you have a harem now, Ryan.
All right, I will. That's fine. Now be quiet. Be quiet, Harem. Shut up. Stop talking. Mute yourselves so I know that you're silent. There you go. Good little harem. Ha ha ha. Chapter 6, Act 1, Chapter 6. There's a reason God created the season of summer. Want to know what that reason is? I would love to tell you, but that would be a very long and drawn-out explanation, beginning with me telling you that God didn't create summer, but rather, it was just a seasonal happening that occurred sometime during the earliest development of our planet. You don't really want to hear that, do you? Instead, I'll give you my viewpoint of what summer truly is. Absolutely.
Wait. Can I please just say
Yeah.
that understanding that there is a God in this universe, apparently, in this fanfiction universe, That makes it like 10 times worse.
Mute yourself. And
Christianity.
don't unmute yourself to say something so stupid again. Just keep yourself muted.
Oh, okay, fine.
That was so dumb. That was so dumb. Oh my god. Okay. Sorry, let me forget that cringe that just happened. Summer who pinged me? XD? Summer had finally arrived. It was a true gift, Summer. The ability to do whatever one could imagine. Within the limits of reality and physics, I suppose. There was no more homework, no more school, no more shitty teachers, and just no more bullshit in general. I was free to be with my friends and family for 3 whole months before heading off to college. And the best part about that was that I was actually staying home. Actually, I truly intended to stay away at school. But once I found Fluttershy, that all changed. I wasn't so sure about bringing her with me to college for a few reasons. For one, where the hell would she stay? My mom wouldn't pay for me to have a single room for myself. Plus, keeping Fluttershy hidden in general would just be an improbable feat. F-E-E-T. So, wrong feat. So, considering I hadn't actually made my final decision, I chose one of the schools by where I lived. It actually turned out that the school of my choice had everything I was looking for. Another great coincidence. I'd be working with one of the better acting programs of my country, which pleased me greatly. But the icing on the cake was that I wouldn't have to leave Fluttershy behind. Why am I babbling like a ninny about all this shit that you probably don't care about? You want to hear about Fluttershy. Well, come summer, I've been with Fluttershy for about 4.5 months.
For what? For what? Why?
It just makes more sense because more people might start trying it.
Yes, I
You
love
know.
this movie. This is a very great movie.
It counts. It
Beta.
counts. It counts.
Beta,
If someone
10 out of
joins,
10
I'm gonna
greatest
mute
movie.
them. I'm just gonna mute you.
This is the best fanfic.
Okay, well, here I go again on my own. Where is I at? Oh, being with her was a total blast. I'd gotten her so invested in comics that it was insane. I introduced her to a ton of musical groups, showed her tons of movies, and just got her up to speed with how things worked here on Earth. She assimilated pretty easily to everything, actually. Based. 2 of the more memorable days we had before summer had arrived were my 18th birthday. Oh no. And my actual graduation. For both events, I celebrated with my friends and family, but afterwards, I would always celebrate with just Fluttershy. Those were some of the most romantic moments we shared. On my birthday, we shared some cake while listening to some Daughtry. They were Fluttershy's favorite band. My favorite band is always up in the air. Protoman. It was such a simple evening, but it was somehow so much more fun than the time I had spent with my friends and family. I think my graduation was even more intense, though. That was mostly spent with my family, as most of my friends were busy celebrating with their families. That night, Fluttershy and I just ate pizza, drank some soda and iced tea, and danced together in the basement. Some of my music actually allows for some dancing, believe it or not. At the time, that was the greatest moment we had shared together. It was just so perfect. However, now that the summer had arrived, some days I had to work. I actually worked as a lifeguard, and my schedule wasn't too packed, but as usual, I just felt shitty leaving Fluttershy alone at home. Fluttershy alone at home! She got used to it easily as she had with me going to school, and every night, once I returned home from work, we would greet each other with a big hug. Those were always nice. But as time went by, 2 things became more and more apparent to me. First of all, Fluttershy still didn't have her cutie mark. There wasn't much I could do about that. For her to get it, she would have to talk to some animals, and I didn't have an active supply of those in my home. Secondly, I began to notice more and more that Fluttershy would sometimes stare out the windows either in my room or in the basement. For the 4 months that I had been with her, she hadn't once stepped foot, hoof, out of my house. And I, in good conscience, could not keep her here for the rest of her life. That's so funny. At the time, I was so naive about thinking I'd be with her for the rest of my life. I completely blocked out the thoughts of her being taken away from me. I didn't think about the day that she would be taken back to Equestria. I just didn't think it was going to happen. With all such thoughts absent from my mind, one day in July, I decided I was going to finally change some things. Fluttershy and I woke up from out slumber. Thankfully, both my sister and mother had work today, so they were not home. And just as luckily, I didn't have work either. I was carefree. Today, I planned to take Fluttershy out to the field of my old elementary school. It was a vast open space with birds flying all around. That was something else I meant to help Fluttershy with. Flying. As for getting her to the field without people noticing her, that was a completely different task. Fluttershy was still small enough for me to be able to pack in one of my duffel bags. I hated the idea of it, but it worked. As Fluttershy and I arrived at school, I got out of my car and gently lifted the bag on my shoulder. I walked over to one of the corners of the fenced field. Luckily for us, there was no one else present during the day. Likewise, there was a perfect amount of shade to cover us from both peering eyes and the searing heat of the sun. Thankfully, it wasn't terribly hot on this day. Letting Fluttershy out of the bag, she began to look around and admire all that her eyes could take in. She was enamored by all the colors, the smell of the fresh, crisp summer, and the chirping of the different birds hovering overhead. Her eyes were beaming with joy. "Oh, Matthew, it's beautiful out here," she said, elated to be out of the house at last. "Isn't it?" I remarked, sitting down in the shade. Summer is one of the best times of the year, provided one can get over the heat, which at times can be quite brutal. Other times, like today, the sun can be quite pleasant. I remember days when I was only about 10 years old, and when I'd be on this field all the time, playing with my friends. We would imagine the craziest things to do. Fluttershy sat down next to me and tucked herself under my arm. "What kind of games did you play?" she asked curiously. I smiled. "Well, most often we would pretend we were all sorts of different heroes or villains. We would get so much inspiration from TV it was almost laughable. We would ride our bikes everywhere, too." Man, I stopped myself, almost bringing myself to cry. Fluttershy must have noticed, before she started to hug me. "It sounds like you had a fun childhood, Matthew." I really did. I miss those days. I looked up to the sky through my sunglasses and smiled contently. I watched as some of the birds hovered above us. Soon enough, a small flock of them had gathered over us. I had not the slightest clue as to what brought them to us, until I noticed Fluttershy humming softly as she rested under my arm. She was humming a sweet little tune that I hadn't heard her sing before. It was so beautiful, and it seemed as though the birds really enjoyed it too. I nudged her to open her eyes and showed her the crowd she'd attracted. She looked up in amazement and smiled gleefully. She stood up and continued humming the tune. The birds began to fly around her, some of them even copying her song. And then Fluttershy started to actually who the hell just joined? Mrs. Green? Welcome back. But anyway, where was I? As Fluttershy continued singing, I finally recognized that she was singing the same song as from the episode of MLP that she earned her cutie mark. She changed up a few words here and there to match her current situation rather than that of the episode, but it was still just as beautiful. And as she hit those last few notes, she landed on the ground in front of me, her new animal friends gathering around her in haste. Who else just joined? Welcome, Echo. Now,
What?
as I was saying, please don't speak. As I was saying, hey, why, hello, fellow little friends, she greeted all of them. It seemed that some of the animals were starting to talk to her. Why, thank you, she said. I soon one of them complimented her singing, and then it hit me, like a goddamn steam train hit me. She was talking to the animals. And then as Fluttershy kept talking to her new friends, her flanks began shining. My heart skipped about 10 beats. Right before my eyes, Fluttershy earned her cutie mark. Some of the animals took notice too, and I started to cry. Fluttershy turned to me, looking concerned. Matthew, what's wrong? She asked. I gestured to her flanks, and she looked at the 3 pink butterflies that had formed there. What's this? That's your cutie mark, Fluttershy, I said, beaming with ecstasy. I started to laugh and cry as I knelt next to her and her animal friends. I explained to Fluttershy that earning her cutie mark was a big deal, and once I had told her everything I could, she wrapped me up in a warm hug. I got up and spun her around, smiling and laughing with her all the while. I placed Fluttershy on the ground and started hopping around like a lunatic. Fluttershy began laughing at me, and I playfully shushed her. The joy within Fluttershy was palpable to a fault. She was beaming with as much pride as I was. "Oh, Matthew, I'm just so happy. I feel like I could soar through the skies for days." And as she said that, she leapt into the air and began to fly once again. And then, I felt as though I received a swift and painful smack to the face. Just moments ago, Fluttershy was hovering in the air. Now she was completely flying. "Fluttershy, holy shit, you're flying! You were flying a moment ago, and now look at you," I said ecstatically. Fluttershy immediately took notice, and the smile on her face only grew wider. "Gosh, I can't believe it. I'm just so happy right now," she exclaimed. The birds and butterflies hovered in the air with her, only adding to her gracefulness. I thought I, as a whole, was going to melt into a puddle of the feels. Yes, I just said that. A few moments later, I noticed a group of people from way across the field. This prompted me to beckon Fluttershy to the ground. I then told Fluttershy that we should probably go. She agreed, but before she got into my bag, she said goodbye to all her new friends, assuring them that we'd be back in the next few days. I knew for a fact that we would be back soon. I walked back to the car, Fluttershy with me in my bag, and we headed home. Once we arrived, it was about 4 in the afternoon. We still had about an hour or two left to kill before either my mother or sister returned home. But quite frankly, neither Fluttershy nor I really acknowledged this. We were just so uplifted by the day's events. We celebrated in the basement with some daughtry and some snacks. It didn't take a genius to tell how elated we both were. At one point, when I had been tired out from dancing, Fluttershy jumped onto the couch next to me and wrapped me in a tight hug. I gladly returned the hug. "Matthew, I think this has been the greatest day of my life," she said, a great deal of cheer in her voice. "You know, Fluttershy, me too." I ran my hand through her mane as I did very often, and I even kissed her on the cheek. She looked at me, her cheeks turning a shade of light red, but nevertheless, she smiled cheerily. Soon enough, it was bedtime. By then, we were exhausted. As usual, Fluttershy and I retired to my bed. On this night, it seemed even more comfortable than before. We both cleaned up before snuggling together in bed and enjoying a quick comic book. After finishing it, I shut the light off and held her, quote, close, awaiting the moment I would be knocked out. But before that happened, a miraculous thing happened. Without warning, Fluttershy pulled me close and pressed her lips to mine. I opened my eyes in surprise, but I quickly shut them and melted in the kiss. The kiss probably lasted about 15 seconds, but it felt like it lasted an eternity, and it was beautiful. I locked eyes with Fluttershy as we released the kiss. "I love you, Matthew," she said. My heart skipped another 10 beats. Fluttershy and I had gotten used to kissing each other on the cheek, and maybe playfully telling each other that we loved each other, but nothing like this had ever happened before. We just shared our first real kiss, and right after, Fluttershy told me she loved me. My mind went blank for a second. I was so surprised, but after finally finding myself, I replied, "I love you too, Fluttershy." We smiled into each other's souls, and before we knew it, we were asleep. It was just the two of us together, for what seemed like forever. It was just Fluttershy and me, the title of the story. Again. For like the 4th time. Who sent me a friend request? I'm really busy right now. Mrs. Green, I'll accept it because I'm really kind. Okay, senseless flattery. Let me take a sip of my water. Don't say anything. Don't speak. Don't unmute yourselves. I said don't speak! Here I go. Chapter 7, Act 1, Chapter 7. From then on, please, this is, you can't just, okay. From then on, I took Fluttershy to that field whenever I could. We spent most of the summer there. In fact, we are more or less, or more specifically, she made so many new friends. She loved being outside during the summer, being with her animal friends, being with me. We shared many more kisses after that night, and many more utterances of those 3 lovely words, "I love you." By this point, Fluttershy and I were taking things quite seriously, and none of us thought of what we were doing as weird We were well aware of our differences, mostly obviously in species, but it didn't bother us much. We weren't concerned about the aesthetics. All we needed was the what? All we needed what was the love we felt for each other. Boy, was that corny and poorly written. Regardless of the corny nature of our relationship, things continued on mostly as they were. Beginning right at the start of that September, I began college. I described to Fluttershy how it would work. It was mostly the same as high school. However, with college, I would be able to come home in between my classes. It really depended on my schedule for the day. Some days I was able to get home earlier, and others I was able to wake up later, but I had to stay at school later. Fluttershy didn't mind. I'd begun leaving her comics to read while I was out. During the summer, my stock had increased exponentially, so I had a lot of material for her to enjoy. Sometimes she would even read ahead of me. Mostly she did this to tease me. I really didn't mind, though. She was cute when she teased me, often giggling her cute little laugh and giving me a somewhat seductive wink. One of the best times of my first year in college came during my Christmas/winter break. When the winter arrived, I informed Fluttershy that most of her animal friends wouldn't be out as often as normal. This disappointed her, but luckily for me, I told her this on the day she would first see snow, at least in my world. She loved it. She thought it was beautiful. She wasn't that big of the desolate, empty trees of winter, and really, who is? But she absolutely loved the snow, how it covered the ground and made the world seem like a different place. I told her that while it seemed gloomy as the snow fell, once the sun came out, everything would look so much more beautiful. The sun would cause the white snow to glisten while we might play in the snow. Fortunately for us, we found a day to take a trip to the field while the elementary students weren't in school. Fluttershy and I arrived at the field, but this time, rather than hide her in a bag, I let her walk with me. I always enjoyed the crunching of the snow beneath my feet, and she seemed to as well. I'd managed to get 2 pairs of boots for her, so her hooves wouldn't get cold, and I provided her with a comfortable vest and scarf to keep her body warm. We walked over to our usual spot. I decided not to sit to keep my ass from getting soaked, but Fluttershy seemed to find some sort of comfort in the coolness that the snow provided as she sat down, while she admired the beauty of the snow on this sunny day. I started walking around, trying to see if I could walk across some of the frozen sheets without falling through. My rate of success was lacking. I kept swearing under my breath as I continued to fail, which made Fluttershy giggle continuously at me. I turned back at her and childishly stuck my tongue out at her. She laughed and flew over to me, knocking me down into the snow. "Oops," she said playfully, laughing as she flew away from me. "Oh, you're dead!" I exclaimed, getting up and chasing after her. Ever since she started flying, Fluttershy had just been getting consistently better at it, to a point that I couldn't even keep up with her very well. And now, considering that I was running through high sheets of snow, I was even slower. So seeing as though I couldn't catch her, I made myself a few snowballs. I made sure none of them were too hard or had any pieces of ice in them before beginning my assault. As I started pelting Fluttershy with snowballs, she squeaked in surprise at the first few. Then she began laughing as I continued to miss. My aim wasn't top notch. Finally, I managed to hit her, which caused her to lose her balance. I got under her and pulled her down to the ground. We tumbled together in the snow as I started tickling her. She was laughing hysterically, begging me to end the torment. But I continued on, not letting up for a moment. Yet somehow she found the strength to lift her wings up and started tickling me with them. Soon enough, I was on my back, being tortured through my heavy coat by her wings. "Is somebody ticklish?" she playfully asked me. I tried to answer, but she was so relentless and no words could escape my mouth. She giggled as she continued an unending spree of tickling. I began tapping the ground. I tap, please stop!" I managed to speak. She finally stopped, hovering above me. I picked up some snow and threw it at her. "You stink," she giggled. "You started it." I began to breathe heavily, trying to pick myself up. She landed behind me and helped me to sit up. She then wrapped her wings around me and hugged me. "Thanks," I said as she rested her head on my shoulder. I pecked her on the cheek and rested my head against hers. "Of course," she replied. Can you please? Please. Where was I? Oh. We just sat there without a care in the world. The rest of what was happening around us didn't seem to matter to us. All that we were focused on was each other. We found ourselves sharing a few kisses, but we seemed to spend more time locking eyes with each other. Her eyes were Whenever I looked into Fluttershy's eyes, I always seemed to find myself in a different dimension. It was sweeter than candy, more intense than the sun going supernova, and deeper than the furthest depths of the ocean. Looking into those cyan blue eyes of hers was an experience I had been able to feel for the longest time. What made it better was that Fluttershy and I often found ourselves staring into each other's eyes quite often, whereas in the past I never felt these moments at all. I now got to experience the feeling of ecstasy almost every day. I found myself lying back down, and Fluttershy came with me. Oh, she was lying on top of me, resting her head peacefully on my chest. I began to stroke her mane, looking up into the sky as sun beamed down on us and the snow surrounding us. It was just so serene and enamoring. Fluttershy found herself ensconced, big word, in my arms, and I found myself teeming with joy having her there with me. It felt like this moment could last forever. I wish it could have, but unfortunately, the moment was interrupted when I heard voices from afar. We did as we usually would when people would arrive on the field. We ran behind a line of trees across the field that no one could see behind. We waited for the children to pass, and then we made our way back to my car. Before getting in, Fluttershy took off the remnants of the snow that was on her. I patted the snow off myself as well. And then we got in the car and headed home. Fluttershy hadn't had enough of the snow, however, so when we got back, we just sat out in the backyard. There were bushes surrounding the yard, so no one would see us. We just sat there and continued to admire each other and our surroundings. It was the moments like these that I had grown to cherish the most. They were so important, not just to me, but to Fluttershy as well. We spoke no words to each other. All we did was enjoy each other's company, and that's all we needed. It's the end of this chapter.
What an incredible chapter.
I know.
Easily.
There's
the
2
worst.
hours.
That-
There's
that
2.
was the- that was the worst.
This is truly
We're not
the
even
greatest.
halfway through the story.
That was easily the worst chapter.
No, it was the.
There's 20 chapters.
I honestly don't remember anything from the chapter.
That's okay.
I'm like
Yeah.
really surprised you're not getting bored, to be honest.
Me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you were doing other stuff. You're the one reading.
We're the ones who should
It's
get
fun. It's kind of fun to read. It's really retarded.
Okay, voice actor wannabe.
Just because I'm a really good voice actor doesn't mean you need to make fun of me.
I'm not
Shit
making
on
fun
me
of
is
you.
bad.
Can Green cure
Thanks
her
for not making fun of me.
macarons?
It's great to finally not be made fun of for my MLP voice acting talent. Did you know I voice acted some of the characters in MLP?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, Ryan.
I'm sorry, I'm mentally
Also,
ill.
Ryan,
Ryan
Yeah?
voiced
this is very important, but I'm currently making you and Beta's MLPOCs, so.
All right. Luckily, my house will blow up as soon as I see it.
I hope
I've,
you
I've
blow
Good.
it.
I
I hope I
want
blow
it to explode. That's what a Nazi would say.
Ryan, we've been doing this for an hour and
Okay,
22 minutes.
Nazi.
Beta and
What was that?
We've been doing this for an hour and 20 minutes.
Okay.
Beta and me.
Do you guys need to stop anytime soon?
Can
I mean, I'm
can I
okay. It's
kill
just like
you,
I'm just
Green?
worried
I
about
will
you.
literally
How
murder
you've
you.
done this for like an hour and a half.
Okay, I guess we'll continue for now.
Maybe the most exciting thing I've done all week.
I am very excited to listen to.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom though. You guys can take a bit of a break. Okay, I might leave again. I kind of regret coming back. This is too chaotic.
Ryan, what do you got? Bring the mic with you.
What are you talking about, Mrs. Green? This is the world. The world is an angry place.
You're
The
the
world is a
you're-
confusing place.
Green is
The
the one
world
that's
is a
mean.
chaotic place.
Maybe Green tried being less mean. It'll be
Wait,
less.
what chapter are we on?
I'll be right back. Hey, Kendenchi. Did they leave too?
Yeah, they left ages ago.
Why?
though?
Hey,
No idea.
PewDiePie, thank you for the 2000K donation.
Please do never do that again. That was
What
horrible.
chapter is he on?
I have no idea. No one knows.
Um,
Right.
chapter
3 or 4.
one of them. Yeah.
It's 3 or 4. We're not that far. Truly, this is the best book ever made.
Also, Beta, please give
Please.
me details on how you want your My Little Pony OC.
Can you have me like not exist? That would be good.
It's a little too late for that.
Oh.
It's a few years too late. Few years too late.
Hey, Peter, thank you for the sub.
I will murder you, Tommy.
Hey,
I will murder you over it.
thank you for the 2000k.
I mean, if you want,
Oh,
but that will make you kind of gay.
wait, you are right.
Not gonna lie.
Oh, I'll get someone else to do it. I will do it. I'll do like a threesome. I'll kill like one of you, and some guy can kill another one of you. That'll be a foursome. Well, that'll work. I'll kill one of you. I'll kill one of you. And it's only like half gay. My maths isn't great, but that should be about right. Sure, I may be retarded, but at least I'm gonna be a murderer.
Hell yeah.
All right.
A retarded murderer. Booyah! Am I right?
Okay,
Am I right?
Beta.
Hi,
Oh
fellow
my
Edwards,
god. 10 out of 10.
Hiya!
Hiya!
Super funny.
Did somebody tell a funny joke?
Funny joke?
You don't sound British, you sound American. Please don't.
Funny
Americans
joke?
like that.
Funny joke?
Stop! Be quiet. You can't just say funny joke and have it be comedy.
It was a bad thing.
joke?
Change the emphasis. Funny
Truly.
joke?
I am an American.
Funny
I like
joke.
joke?
I like guns. I
Funny
like
joke?
murder.
I like guns. I like
Funny
murder.
joke.
I like self-defense.
Why did you leave? Like
I didn't mean to do that.
Okay, silly Billy.
Okay,
Friggin' silly goose. All right, let me continue.
Yeah.
okay. It's time
That's all
for
good.
Okay. We're on chapter 8, Act 1, chapter 8. Why is it Act? Whatever.
Beta thought we were on chapter 4.
Bro,
Beta.
I've read 7 chapters so far. Give me a little credit. Kind of undercutting what I've read. But here we go. I'm ready. Time went by rather quickly in my freshman year of college. My classes were all quite interesting, considering most of them were either theater classes. Period. Alright. If not that, then the classes were just based around topics I was genuinely interested in. I made some new friends, studied hard, performed 2 musicals, but above all else, I got to share all of this time with Fluttershy. Before I knew it, Fluttershy and I had been together for an entire year. Luckily, the day fell upon a Saturday, so we were able to celebrate all day long. We decided to consider that day her birthday, seeing as though she couldn't remember her actual birthday. That made the day even more enjoyable. The day was nice enough that we were actually able to head over to the field for a while and just relax together. Fluttershy and I couldn't have been closer. We were inseparable. Nothing could come between us. She loved me, and I loved her. I never thought I would actually be able to feel such a capacity for love in my life, but somehow it actually happened. We'd only been together for a year, and I felt as though I could lay my life on the line for her. We would share kisses every day. Beyond that, we didn't explore much else. Of course, we both loved each other, but we equally thought it was weird for us to go any further than kissing. Fluttershy thought this more than me. Actually, I mean, I'm not a fan of bestiality. Anyone who is should probably get checked up on, but Fluttershy was seriously opposed. But hey, we didn't care. We just needed each other. Seriously, could this story get any cornier? The answer? Yes. Fluttershy's first birthday here on Earth was probably one of the corniest days we shared. But while it was most certainly corny, it was probably one of the greatest days we shared together. Every moment of it was just magnificent. The day began with the 2 of us waking up in each other's arms. In her case, I guess that's her front legs. I woke up first, waking her up by pecking her on the nose with a soft kiss. She giggled awake and pecked my nose right back. We were both shivering a bit in bed, which meant that it was going to be a cold day. It actually snowed the day prior, which meant we were in for a peculiar day. Luckily, Fluttershy's birthday fell on a Saturday, meaning we had the whole day to ourselves. This was even better than when my sister and mother were out for the day in the city. After we shared our kisses, I sat up in bed. Fluttershy started rubbing my back, to my noticeable approval. As I sighed heavily and seemingly sank down, she kissed the back of my neck and then hugged me. I held her hooves in my hand as I looked at her. "Happy birthday, Fluttershy," I said, smiling at her. She smiled back and kissed my cheek. Somebody just sent me a message. Oh. Alright, let's ignore that. "Thank you, Matthew. I can hardly believe it's been an entire year. I guess time flies when you're in love," she said, giggling. I laughed as well, and she sighed once more. "You know, it's weird. You've been here for a year, but you're not 1 year old. You're actually 15 now. Isn't that weird?" She giggled some more and nodded. "I guess so, but it doesn't matter. As long as I'm with you, I don't care." I kissed her cheeks as she said that, causing my heart to jump a bit in happiness. I hopped up out of the bed and cracked the various parts of the body that needed cracking. Fluttershy let out a cute yawn as she fluttered onto the floor. She walked into the bathroom with me. I pulled out a hairbrush and started to fix her mane. Fluttershy had a knack for falling victim to the troubles of waking up with a messy head of hair. I wasn't that bad, seeing as though my hair was short, but Fluttershy would often wake up with a mess on her head. It was fine, though. I greatly enjoyed fixing her mane and looking at it, making it look beautiful. Honestly, though, Fluttershy was always beautiful to me. She stepped out, allowing me to squeeze the lemon, as I did every morning when I woke up. After my business with the porcelain throne was concluded, I walked back into my room and put on my clothes. We then walked downstairs and had a quick breakfast before heading out into the snow. We decided to play it the easy way on this day by staying at my house and just playing in the backyard. No one was going out on this day, so we were safe to enjoy our usual snow day antics in the backyard. Made a small snowman, which I was quick to decapitate, much to Fluttershy's dismay, built some snow forts, had a snowball fight, and laid out in the snow while cuddling. Once we had enough of the cold, we went back inside and drank some hot cocoa while watching one of our favorite movies, The Iron Giant. I cried at the end. Fluttershy comforted me, and we had a grand old time. Afterwards, Fluttershy and I headed into the basement to listen to some music and just relax for a while. We bundled up in a blanket due to my basement being as cold as the Arctic, and just listened to whatever my laptop played. At some point, though, Fluttershy sat up, looked into my eyes, and asked me a question I couldn't have even seen coming. And honestly, I was hoping she was never going to ask this question. "Matthew," she started, "are we going to be together forever?" I opened my eyes and looked into hers, the two of us just locking our gazes for a moment, in complete silence. I was giving Fluttershy a deadpan expression. I looked away from her and stared blankly into oblivion. I couldn't think of what to say. In my heart, I wanted to be with Fluttershy forever. It was all I would ever dream about, just the two of us together forever. But in reality, I knew that couldn't happen. There was a few reasons that came to mind as to why not, but there was one that was most prominently imprinted in my mind. It was that, at some point, Fluttershy was going to have to go home. I didn't know when or how, but I knew it was going to happen at some point. But in that instance, that point just seemed to dissipate completely from my mind. I suddenly knew exactly what I wanted to say, so I said it. "Of course we are, Fluttershy," I answered her. "We're going to spend eternity together. Nothing will be able to separate us. I won't ever let that happen. We're going to be together forever." With that said, Fluttershy wrapped her front legs around me. I then wrapped my arms around her, and we just sat there for a moment, with the music still playing in the background. Fortunately enough, Fluttershy's favorite song was playing. It was My Friend by Nine Lashes. It was such a sweet song. It seemed to mean a lot to her. And in a few more moments, we had started kissing each other. After that was done, we just looked into each other's eyes some more, losing ourselves in the serenity of the moment. You couldn't find someone depraved enough to disrupt the moment we were sharing. Once we were finished, we headed back upstairs. I ordered a pizza for us while Fluttershy made some iced tea. Once our food arrived, we were quick to devour 3/4 of the pie, leaving 2 for another day, or for either my mom or sister to steal. Once that was done, I took out some from the freezer an ice cream cake I had bought a few days earlier for Fluttershy. It was a classic vanilla ice cream cake with chocolate ice cream and chocolate chips in the middle with some colorful designs on it. I'd written myself, "Happy birthday, Fluttershy," on the cake. She loved it, as I expected, and after that was done, we were stuffed. We decided to go to bed early that night. After we both showered quickly, brushed our teeth, and I had gotten dressed, we got in bed for some quick comic reading. After that, we were off to sleep. But tonight, something different happened. Something magical. I could never forget this dream. It was just too vivid for me to forget. I found myself flying in the clouds with an elegant pair of wings on my back. They looked like eagle wings, actually. I'd always admired eagles. I was alone, soaring gracefully in the sky. It was just so beautiful and wondrous that I couldn't possibly want to let the dream go. Then suddenly, to my right, I saw Fluttershy flying with me. She looked over to me and smiled. I smiled back to her. I took her hoof in my hand as we flew through the sky together. Nothing was going to pull us apart. Not in this dream. Not ever. We were inseparable. That much was certain. Fluttershy and I then flew straight up into the air, spiraling into each other's embrace. I held her close, and she wrapped her wings around me. We shared a long, passionate kiss, allowing ourselves to fall for a moment before soaring back into the air. It was the most beautiful dream I had ever had. Rather, I should say it was the most beautiful dream we had ever had. We awoke the next morning, holding each other close. We opened our eyes simultaneously, looking into each other's souls. Fluttershy nearly started to cry. Hell, I nearly started to cry. Somehow we had dreamed together. We had both experienced the same dream. We had been linked together in our dreams, and if I hadn't driven the nail home yet, we shared a dream. No force on Earth can explain this. As far as I know, this isn't even possible on Earth, yet through some magical force it happened. It was the most harmonious moment of our lives. "I love you, Matthew," Fluttershy said after a few moments had gone by. "I love you too, Fluttershy," I replied, kissing her passionately. We then held each other in a warm embrace for what felt like forever. In just 1 year, Fluttershy and I had been through so much together. I couldn't possibly imagine how much more we would experience together. And that's the end of Chapter 8, Act 1, Chapter 8.
Green left again.
Oh, bye.
Yeah, Mrs. Green.
Who left?
Mrs. Green left again. They went, I hope you choke on the Orby too. No, they went.
This is so sad, guys.
I told them
that too.
I said, they went, oh, I was talking to them text. And they
Soon
went,
we will get to Act 2.
What do you call it? Right, what was at the beginning of the fucking lemon thing?
What are you talking about?
At the beginning of it, when he was like squeezing lemon. What the fuck?
Oh yeah, that was weird.
I wasn't really listening, so
I'll scroll up and show you, or reread it to you.
Reread?
Reread it. Reread it.
Reread.
He left. Goodbye, Mr. Berta.
Oh.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Let me find it.
Hello, Mr. Beta.
Hello, Mr. Beta. Welcome to our live
updated
reading
this
of Hatsune Miku and me.
Wait. Let me read it to you. Here's the sentence. "She stepped out, allowing me to squeeze the lemon as I did every morning when I woke up. After my business with the porcelain throne was concluded, I went back into my room and put on my clothes." I don't know what that means.
But wait, what does that mean? Because I feel like squeeze the lemon isn't standing for squeezing a lemon, so I'm...
no fucking
what?
shit.
I don't know what it
Shut up, dude.
means.
It might be pink, maybe, or it's worse. Please don't tell me
I
what
hate
it
that
is.
I thought I took it literally. Like
It's,
when you read
cool.
it, I was like, yeah, squeeze lemon juice, yeah.
Okay, it's urinating.
What?
It's urinating. It's just peeing.
I hope so. I sure hope so. I
Yeah,
sure
like-
hope he doesn't have a set time to do something a little more illicit.
I googled.
He's like, "Hold on, Fluttershy.
Every morning.
I have to go do something. I'll be right back."
Don't worry, Google never lies.
Yeah, that was bad. Oh god.
Squeeze the lemon.
Squeeze the lemon, and then my business on the porcelain throne.
That was excessive. Like, why?
Well,
Just say like take a shit or something. What?
You know she would. You know they. Wait, what did they say before about like bestiality?
Top definition.
That was
Squeeze
funny.
the lemon. To relieve
Yeah,
oneself
that's
by
harsh.
urinating. Fluid colors may be the same as a lemon being squeezed.
Be right back. Have to go squeeze the lemon and lay
Oh my
a
gosh,
tape.
pee is yellow? That's so
Ooh.
shocking, guys.
Unless you drink too much, then it's clear and it just looks like water.
What do you mean drink too much? That you're supposed to do that.
Ooh, woo.
What?
Okay, Mr. Dehydrated.
Okay, Mrs. Water Poisoning.
Right, can we continue?
Okay, sorry. Here's chapter 9, act 1, chapter 9.
Okay, shut up, Clemmy.
Thank you.
I didn't say anything.
When I say I couldn't have imagined what Fluttershy and I would go through together, I mean that with all sincerity. I bet you're wondering what we did go through together. The long answer would include numerous romantic instances leading to much kissing and cuddling, a few sad moments in which we cried and comforted each other, and many hysterical moments which ended in laughter and tickling. She's so ticklish. The short answer? A time skip of 5 years. Fluttershy and me,
Right.
we went through so much together. It seemed like time was just a blur, and everything that was occurring around me was nothingness. All that mattered in my life was her, and all that mattered to her was me. We guided each other through our lives as if it was our God-given nature to do so. When I say there was nothing that could separate us, I mean that quite literally. There is no force on heaven or hell, there is no force on heaven or earth that could split us apart. H-E double hockey sticks, I bet there isn't a magical force in Equestria that could separate us. Our love was stronger than anything. All the books and comics Fluttershy and I read together depicted numerous romances and romantic happenings, but nothing can compare to what we had. You know those fairy tale endings where the bride and groom ride off into the sunset to live happily ever after? Yeah, fuck that. Our love makes those shits look about as happy as Spider-Man when Gwent died. Spoilers. Being with Fluttershy made the rest of my college career roll on like a simple breeze on a cool spring day. 4 years in college seemingly amounted to nothing with her around. At the end of it all, I graduated with a BFA in musical theater, and by the time I had graduated, I'd turned 21. Man, that was a crazy birthday. My family and I took a trip to Las Vegas. Put it simply, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I cheated on Fluttershy. But of course, I couldn't share a moment. I couldn't share a moment like my 21st without Fluttershy. We did our usual thing, as we had done for all my birthdays. We enjoyed some nice food, danced some music, and just enjoyed ourselves. The same went for my graduation from college. In the 6 years that Fluttershy and I had been together, it had become insanely easy to keep her hidden from my mother and sister. We developed a routine that ran like clockwork. Whereas when I found Fluttershy, I was always jumpy and nervous around my family. Now I could play it about as cool as ice. That was lame. I even managed to maintain my reputation in society because, I still had friends and family aside from Fluttershy. But nevertheless, Fluttershy always came first. Nothing could change that. When I finally moved out of my home and got my own place to live in the Big Apple, keeping Fluttershy secret wasn't even a problem anymore. Sure, I'd have friends over sometimes for parties and whatnot, but she would just stay in our bedroom for the time being. Finding her was like finding a needle in a haystack, if you will. Probably thinking that Fluttershy would be locked inside more often now that we were in a big city. You'd be wrong. I picked a place in one of the more suburban areas of the city. Not far from my home was a big open space that had seemingly been untouched for some time. We would often spend time there, just cuddling underneath the many trees that littered the landscape. My money mostly came from my day job and what few shows I was performing in. I was still waiting for my big break, as most actors fresh out of college do. Most of the shows I performed in were either short-lived or one-night stands. My day job was actually bartending, which I managed to pick up a knack for during my college days. I did so well that I made phenomenal tips most days. And then finally, my big break arrived. That's a day I'll never forget. Why? It's not the reason you're probably thinking of. In fact, I don't remember it as a happy day at all. I remember it as one of the saddest days of my life. It was a sunny Saturday morning. I managed to snap up an audition spot for a new original show that sought to steal the spotlight from the rest of Broadway. Or off-Broadway, I should say. I had to get up early and prepare myself for what would no doubt be one of the most important days of my career. Fluttershy joined me, of course. Once I was ready, we shared a kiss, and I was off to the audition. However, something had been bothering me as of late. Really, it had been bothering me since the day I'd found Fluttershy in the dumpster on my block. Fluttershy obviously wasn't on this world. of this world. She came from Equestria, obviously. Now, that wasn't really the big thing that was bothering. I knew she didn't necessarily belong here, but did I care? Obviously not. What had really been bothering me was that I hadn't told her any of this yet. For 6 years, I had hidden from her the fact that she was from a fictional cartoon show. It had been hanging over me like a leering crow now more than ever. Why, I couldn't tell you. It just seemed like my time as Fluttershy was coming to a head. Something was going to happen soon. And this whole thing about me keeping a Fluttershy's origin a secret was just hurting me. So my plan for the day was to rock my audition, go pick up a pizza and some soda for a celebration lunch, and tell Fluttershy what I needed to tell her. Much easier said than done, let me tell you. As I planned, my audition went swimmingly. I was certain that I would at least nail an ensemble part for the show, which was all I really wanted. I just wanted to be able to perform in a real show, so soon after I finished up at theater, I hitched a ride on the subway back home. Once I was closer to my place, I stopped and picked up a pizza and some Dr. Pepper, and then I headed home. My heart felt heavier and heavier with every step I took heading home. As soon as I arrived, it felt like my heart was in the pit of my stomach. I walked up the steps to my apartment, pizza and soda in hand. I walked in with a huge smile on my face. Fluttershy rushed over to the door and flew in front of me, smiling right back at me. "How'd it go?" she eagerly asked me. "About as awesome as you'd expect it to," I answered. Fluttershy started kissing me on the cheek, making me laugh and lose my balance a bit as I tried to walk over to the table and set down the items in my hand. Fluttershy was giggling as I grabbed her out of the air and started tickling her. I then kissed her on the cheek and ran my hand through her mane as she always loved. By this point, Fluttershy had grown to her normal size like in the show. She was so much easier to grab onto and cuddle with now, which we did quite often. Cuddling was probably her favorite thing to do with kissing right next to it. As we ate our pizza and drank our soda with me burping comically every now and then, I just kept looking into Fluttershy's eyes. I don't think she noticed, but as I stared, a single tear ran down my cheek. When we finished eating, we sat at the table for a while just discussing my audition. I told her how perfect my singing was, not messing up a single note. I told her how I spoke my comedic monologue like it was my own work of comedy. And I told her how my dancing skills were so enamoring, the judges would have asked for more time if time allowed it. And once that was done, we went to the living room. Arrogance. I sat down next to Fluttershy on the couch, nervously grabbing the bow, shook in my head for a moment. Fluttershy took notice and seemed worried about me. She placed her hoof on my hand, looking at me with a smile on her face, no doubt trying to cheer me up. I looked back, trying to work up a smile. "Matthew, what's wrong?" she asked me, both of my hands now shaking. My breathing grew heavier by the moment, and I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I looked at the TV, raising the remote up and turning it on. As some random channel came on, I looked back at Fluttershy. "Fluttershy," I started. "Something I need to tell you." She wore a quizzical look on her face. "What, is something wrong? Did I do something bad?" she asked. She then gasped. "Did your audition not go as well as you said?" I stifled a chuckle. I only wish it could have been that. No, it's not really anything you could think of. It's just, this is something I've been wanting to tell you for a while now. "What?" she asked. I responded by flipping to the Hub Network. Lo and behold, My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic was on. The opening theme song had just started. Fluttershy took immediate notice of what was on the screen. She stood up and walked forward. She fell on the floor when she first saw herself. I couldn't see her face, but I didn't need to see her to know she was crying. I could hear it just as easily. I had also started crying by this point. I couldn't bear to look at her. When the song finally ended, Fluttershy stood up and walked over to me. I refused to look at her. She just kept staring at me. "Matthew," she said, "how long have you known about this?" Her voice cracked multiple times as she asked that. I sniffled once before looking up at her. I didn't answer. "How long?" she asked again, nearly screaming at me. I'd never seen her like this. I didn't even think she could act in such a way, least of all towards me. But then again, I deserved every bit of it. "Since the day I found you," I answered, covering my face with my hands. I cried like a little child, and Fluttershy did the exact same thing. I felt the love of my life slipping away from me, and I kept something so from her for so long, and now that I had revealed the truth, I had to suffer the consequences. Why? Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked. Why didn't you tell me when you found me? I shook my head, my lips quivering as I looked up and inhaled heavily. I exhaled and started shaking all over. I didn't want to hurt you. Hurt me, Matthew. Look at me. She told me. I didn't. Look at me. She screamed, stomping her hoof on the floor. I looked at her slowly. Matthew, I'm more hurt now than I would have been if you told me sooner. I'm sorry. Please, I didn't mean for it to be like this. I don't know. I wanted to protect you. Protect me from what, Matthew? She asked, her voice shaking, her crying becoming heavier and heavier. I dropped my head in shame. I don't know, I answered weakly as I continued to cry. I looked up at her. She was still crying as she stood up and looked at me in what seemed like disgust. I couldn't tell. Truthfully, I wasn't sure at this point if she hated me or not. She then walked away from me, heading into our bedroom. I watched her walk, unable to stop her. She shut the door and locked it, leaving me by myself. I felt horrible. No, horrible is too light of a word. I felt disgusting. As I sat there on the couch, I felt I couldn't live with myself. It seemingly felt as though I was losing a part of myself at each passing moment. I felt like a monster. I kept something so important from her for so long. What's worse, I actually thought she would take it well. I thought we would sit down and talk things over. I didn't expect her to just walk away and lock herself in our room. I didn't expect all the tears that were shed. At least not as many. I don't know what I was thinking. And then, when I say she locked herself in our room, I mean it. Fluttershy stayed there for 2 whole days. I was left to sleep on the couch, alone. Every so often, I could hear her sobbing in the bedroom, which led me to curse myself for what I had done. All I could do was just lay on the couch for those 2 days and look up at the ceiling, thinking about how horrible of a person I was. If Fluttershy ever came out, it was just for the bathroom or to get something to eat or drink. We had no eye contact, no verbal contact, no contact at all whatsoever. I was hurting just as much as she was. No, actually, that's a lie. She was hurting far more. I could tell just from her crying. But I was hurting, badly. I'm not sure how much more I can nail the point home that I felt like dirt. On the 3rd day of our separation, I decided to go out for a walk. Hey, Fluttershy, I said softly, knocking on the door to our bedroom. As I expected, I received no answer. I'm just going out for a bit, yeah, I should be back in a while. Still no answer. My head dropping as I walked away from the door and head out. I zipped up my jacket and put my earbuds in, turning on the song Erased by Volumes. I set it to repeat as I set out on my walk. For half hour, I just walked, listening to that song over and over again, all the while looking up into the sky, thinking about what I had done. I kept bashing myself for everything. Felt like everything Fluttershy and I had shared together was a lie all of a sudden. And then I felt nothing. All the feelings of remorse, regret, hatred toward myself just seemed to go away. I felt blank, barren. It felt like part of me had been erased. Unknowingly, I had made my way to the new field that Fluttershy and I had often enjoyed going to together. At first, I could barely stand the sight of this place, but then I calmed down and I walked under the field. I headed over to our favorite tree. The sky had started to become gloomy and dark, leading me to believe it would start to rain soon. And lo and behold, a few minutes after I sat down under the tree, water began to fall from the clouds above. I was well protected from what was becoming a torrential downpour. In a matter of minutes, what was just a light rain turned to a powerful gust of heavy rain and harsh winds. The water from above was being slapped in my direction, so I positioned myself on the other side of the tree, away from the rain. As I sat there, I looked up to the sky for a moment. With the race still playing in my ears, I ripped the earbuds from my head and turned the music off, almost violently. Then my head dropped. I'm sorry, I muttered under my breath. I'm just so sorry, Fluttershy. I'm sorry for what I've done. I don't deserve you. God, I hope you never have to deal with me again after what I've put you through. Why would you want to? I said all this aloud, knowing no one was around to listen. I started to cry, but as I did so, I heard a rather distinct rustling noise among the leaves over my head. I looked up, and to my surprise, I saw Fluttershy spying on me through the thick foliage of the tree. She stared blankly at me, and I stared blankly right back up at her. We stayed like that for a few minutes, before my head dropped back down and continued to cry. Her descent was down, was so silent. I was almost startled by her when she sat down next to me. I didn't look at her. How could I? However, I was practically forced to when she rested her head on my shoulder. I cautiously looked over to the sobbing mare behind me. She surprised me with a tight hug. It seemed as though this embrace would be never-ending. Fluttershy held me tighter than a mother holding her child. It seemed she was crying even harder than the sky was. Matthew, I'm sorry, she said through her tears. What? Fluttershy, you have nothing to be sorry for, I replied, gently wrapping an arm around her. This seemed to make her only hold on to me more tightly. I don't want you to leave me. I don't want to lose you, she cried, burying her face into my chest. I didn't know what to do. I just felt so desolate in that moment. Even though I should have felt so uplifted that after my immense blunder, she still wanted to be with me. But Fluttershy, I started. But I was cut off as she pressed her lips against mine, in the blink of an eye. Again, I didn't know what to do. And then it hit me. I caressed her body in my arms and gently placed one hand against her cheek. When we parted, I pulled her against me, just as tightly as she had been holding me. It seemed as though we were never going to let go of each other. We just sat there, hugging, crying, without a care in the world. It felt like an eternity passed for the two of us, until we finally let each other go. We locked eyes and continued to cry. I pulled Fluttershy in close and kissed her with every ounce of passion in my body. And judging from the kiss, she was doing the same. When we broke the kiss, I was the first to speak. Fluttershy, I'm just so sorry. I should have told you sooner. What I did was stupid. It was selfish. It was... Matthew, you don't have to say anything else. It's okay. Really. I'm fine. How? How can you be fine after what I told you? How can you be fine after finding out that you're really not supposed to be here? That you're just a character from a cartoon show? I questioned. It seemed her gaze was beaming into my soul now. Does it matter? She retorted. And surprisingly, I was speechless. I chuckled and shook my head. I guess not, but still, are you sure you're alright? I think so. It'll take a bit of time for me to get over everything, but honestly, I don't really care. All I care about is being here with you. And after she said that, she nuzzled herself against me, cueing me to quickly wrap her up in my arms. We started laughing together as we joined our lips together once more. I love you, Matthew, she said, resting her head under my chin. I started running my hand through her mane, just as she always loved it. I love you too, Fluttershy. With those last words spoken, I began to explain everything there was to explain to Fluttershy about her origin. The rain didn't appear to be letting up anytime soon. No one was going to be around to spot us, so we had loads of time on our hands/hooves as I explained everything. Fluttershy slowly became more and more intrigued with her origin. It was as if she had forgotten all about how I had kept it from her. All she seemed to care about now was me telling her more about her actual life in Equestria. Then, she asked a peculiar question. It was a question that I didn't really have an answer to. Matthew, she started. What made you tell me all this now, though? Why not sooner? Like I said, I really don't know what to say. And then I felt a spark go off in my brain. I feel like something is going to happen soon. And whatever it is, I just wanted you to know where you came from. I don't know what's coming, but whatever it is, I couldn't let it happen without you knowing this. As I said that, she nodded and rested her head on my shoulder. Do you think I'm going to go home soon? She asked. I felt my heart stop as she spoke these words. It almost stung as she said that. I could barely speak as I replied to her. I don't know. I sort of hope not, but at the same time... I stopped. She looked at me. What? She asked. I sighed, looking to her with a weak smile. Let's not think about that, all right? She nodded and cuddled with me. Let's just focus on us and how much I love you. How I'm not going to let anyone or anything take you away from me. I held her as tightly as I could. She did the same. Just promise me, Matthew, she said. I looked down at her. Promise me that you'll always love me, no matter what. I smiled the biggest smile I'd ever smiled in my life. Without looking like an ass, of course. I promise. And then we shared another kiss. But as we did, the sky began to light up, drawing our attention to the beauty of nature. We held each other closely as we ensconced ourselves peacefully against the tree, watching the incandescence of the sky. Yet, as the beautiful and amorphous lightning spread across the sky, I couldn't help but feel an ache in the pit of my stomach. It felt like all this wasn't the This guy put on a nice show for the love of my life and myself. This was different. All I could do was hope. Hope that what I didn't want to happen wasn't actually going to happen. I had hope for both Fluttershy and me, title of the story. And that is the end of Chapter 9, Act 1, Chapter 9. Crying, this is so sad. A super horrible moment is happening. It's because he's so arrogant. He's so egotistical and arrogant.
He's a bit, I mean, he could have told her about it a bit ago, you know.
I know, that's why it's funny. Can you unmute Columbia, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
what's up?
I don't think this guy could have achieved
I don't-
that because I don't think anyone would.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you
don't think
for releasing me from
He didn't. Yeah,
my slavery
cheat on
there, Beta.
he didn't cheat, but it was just funny because right before that he talked about how he did so amazingly good at the rehearsal that the judges would have given him more time if they could because he was so darn good, and then he just completely throws it all away as he screws everything up.
Right, he did.
It was funny.
Bro,
Right,
Ryan.
he did. Yeah.
Would you like to
Did he?
see
Yeah, he said
your
in New
pony
Vegas.
OC?
What was that?
He cheated on in New Vegas.
Oh, I added that.
Ryan,
Because he's just such a
Oh.
Chad. He's just such a Chad guy.
Yeah, what's up, Life?
you know, Chapter 10 is the longest one.
Well, oh well. Damn.
Ryan, what do you call it? What is it called? I forgot what. Blah, 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 blah. Oh,
This will be the end of Act. This will be the end of Act 1.
Okay, I'm gonna use this in the
That seems about right.
thing.
That was funny though. I couldn't
Ryan-
help but snicker and sneer at him.
Ryan has curly hair.
That is me.
Ryan, how did she know
It
you
was
have curly
just
hair?
funny. It was just funny, bro, though, first of all, that it was like this big, huge emotional scene.
I couldn't
and
help
you
but
were
laugh
trying-
at him.
No. It wasn't just that. It's that you were trying to act and you were trying like it's like you were trying to sound sad, but you were also
I was
laughing.
laughing. I couldn't help but
So,
laugh
like-
at him. It's so
So like it just made it sound so weird because there's like two conflicting things happening.
It's not a tragedy, Sarah. It's a comedy.
So sad.
It's a comedy.
This is so sad. You know.
There's no tragedy. It's a comedy.
Okay,
all a
I'm
comedy.
laughing the whole
Right.
time.
It's just funny. Like Joker said, you get what you deserve.
It's his society.
I'm the Joker, baby.
Okay. Chapter 10, Act 1, Chapter 10.
Okay, I'm gonna.
All right. I hope you guys are ready. You don't need a break or anything, right? I guess not. Here we go. Fluttershy and I returned home as soon as the rain stopped. I walked, she flew. She managed to blend in with the clouds and get home safely without anyone noticing. I stepped in a few puddles here and there, which sucked immensely, but nonetheless, we both arrived home safe and sound. Well, maybe a little less than sound. I wasn't so sure this time. I sat down on the couch, feeling dour and ruined. Fluttershy smiled in my eyes and kissed me on the cheek. I took a quick glance at her and realized she was pretty dirty. I chuckled, and soon she took notice as well. She told me it came from while she was in the tree. Surprisingly, I hadn't noticed it while we were outside. I guess we were having such a strong moment that neither of us cared to acknowledge it. Fluttershy gave me another quick kiss on the cheek and went to clean herself up, leaving me to be alone with my thoughts. I twiddled with my thumbs for the longest time, thinking about everything we'd talked about. For the most part, it seemed like Fluttershy was okay with the truth. She actually seemed a bit happy to have heard all of this. I told her about some of the more interesting adventures on the show. She asked if we could watch some episodes sometime. Who was I to deny that and that? But all the while, as I looked over our big conversation in my head, I was continuously distracted by a painful thought. I remember the way the lightning danced in the sky. It wasn't natural. It didn't sit right with me. There was a lump in the pit of my stomach that wouldn't go away, and I think I knew why. All I could do was sit there and pray that my time with Fluttershy wasn't coming to an end. Unfortunately, a few moments later, there was a knock at the door. Now, if you told me 6 years prior that I was going to find my favorite pony, Fluttershy, in a dumpster on my block, and I was going to spend the next 6 years of my life with her, I'd recommend you to check into an insane asylum. It sounds crazy, but when you think of it, lo and behold, it actually happened to me. I spent 6 years happily in love with someone I thought I'd never be able to meet. Fluttershy turned my life around, and I did the same for her as well. 6 years isn't that long of a time span when you think about it long and hard. Yes, I felt like so much more than that. I felt like I'd spent half of an eternity with her, and that so much more was going to happen. The idea of spending an eternity with your soulmate is so hackneyed nowadays that, to be honest, I couldn't give a shit. I was in love with Fluttershy. She was in love with me. We were inseparable. We were going to be together forever. Or so I thought. As I heard that knocking at the door, that lump in my gut exploded. Feelings of complete misery and despair fell over me. I felt I was going to cry. I knew exactly who was at the door. Fluttershy was still in the bathroom, so our visitors were going to have to wait to see her. I slowly got down to my feet, made my way to the door. Every step as painful as the last. I composed myself and spoke through the door. "Who is it?" I said, feeling quite stupid to be asking a question with such an obvious answer. "Maybe come in," a voice from the other side replied. Now keep in mind, my brony emotions were still fully intact through these 6 years, so you can imagine that when I heard that elegant and regal voice from outside my door, I was backflipping through the skies of my mind. Even at a moment like this, a part of me couldn't wait to lay my eyes upon my visitors. Slowly I opened the door, only to bear witness to one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. I thought she was pretty good looking in the show, but in real life, she radiated pure beauty. Princess Celestia stood proudly on my door, bowing her head to me as we made eye contact. Hello. Matthew, am I correct?" she said. I was surprised she knew my name, and thusly, I asked the appropriate question in the moment. How do you know my name?" She smiled at me. There was much to discuss. "May I come in?" I questioned. Celestia revealed the rest of Fluttershy's friends behind her. My heart exploded into itty-bitty pieces, each of which was singing a joyous song of juvenile ecstasy. The main fucking 6, on my doorstep. Well, technically main 5, because Fluttershy was in my house. But who cares? They were all here. Twilight Sparkle, Rainbow Dash, Pinkie Pie, Applejack, Rarity, and even Spike were all there. Celestia asked once more if they may enter. With a heavy heart, I allowed them to enter, a choice I almost immediately regretted. Ponies and Baby Dragon walked in one by one, each of them taking in their newest surroundings accordingly. Celestia made herself comfortable on the rug in the center of the living room, while the rest of the ponies and Spike continued looking around. Pinkie was bouncing with uncontainable energy as she usually does. "Wow, we're actually in the home of an alien. It's so weird. Actually, if you look, it's almost like our home. I wonder if they've got food like we do. Do you have any food, mister? Huh, huh, huh?" She spoke sporadically, Applejack having to hold her down and cover. "Pinkie, this ain't no time for snacking," Applejack interjected, her stomach then growling lightly. She chuckled and scrunched her muzzle in that funny way she did in the Discord episodes. I couldn't help but laugh. "There's some snacks in the refrigerator in the kitchen if you want them," I told them. They smiled and walked/hopped into the kitchen. That left me with Celestia, Twilight, Dash, Rarity, and Spike. Rarity seemed interested in the various memorabilia items I had strewn across the apartment. Spike was particularly interested in my comics. "This is so cool! These guys even have comic books. Hey, alien, want to trade?" the little dragon asked me. Chuckled lightly at his young optimism. "Spike, please, aren't you getting a little ahead of yourself?" Rarity questioned. "After all, we won't be here long." It felt as if she had just stabbed me with her words. It must have shown on my face, as Celestia seemed to take note. "You seem distressed, Matthew," she said, quite bluntly, I might add. "Well, you know, when 6 ponies and a baby dragon come walking into your apartment, you tend to get a little freaked out," I replied. "As freaked out as when you found Fluttershy?" she asked. My heart skipped a beat. My breathing fell off as well. My head dropped. I gave up. "What do you want?" I asked her. "We want Fluttershy back," Rainbow Dash intervened, flying towards me. "Give her back!" I knew Dash could be pushy, but this was something new. "Rainbow Dash, stop it! You're scaring him!" Twilight to her, trying to get her to back off. "I can assure you, I'm not afraid of Rainbow Dash here. I'm just sad, I guess." I let out a heavy sigh of agony. Suppose there's no reason to dodge what's going on here. I'll ask the obvious question with the obvious answer. Are you here to take Fluttershy from me? Celestia looked at Twilight, both of them looking slightly disheartened. The princess looked back at me and nodded. I looked away and nodded to myself. If it's any consolation to you, Matthew, just know that we do not do this lightheartedly, Celestia said to me, trying to comfort me. I couldn't blame them for what they were doing. I only wish that it didn't have to be done. I nodded and stood up, closing my eyes and taking a deep breath. I began walking to my room, letting Pinky and Applejack pass by as they trotted back into the living room after finishing in the kitchen. Just before I entered the bathroom, I took a quick glance back at the ponies, awaiting my return with Fluttershy. My heart was pounding as I slowly opened the door. Fluttershy was finishing up cleaning her mane. It was still slightly wet, and I could see a few water droplets still in her coat. I shut the door behind me and walked in, kneeling down beside her and helping her to dry off. She looked back to me, smiled.
What are we watching?
We're not watching anything. Please be quiet. Bye. Rainbow Dash. Alright, sorry. I tried to work up a smile, but my optimistic attitude had seemingly been destroyed moments ago. I couldn't even crack a grin. Fluttershy took immediate notice of this, her smiling dissipating with a stare of worry taking its place. Matthew, is something wrong? She asked. I could hardly stand to look at her. Well, I don't know. Let's just dry off, okay? I said, managing to fake a smile. Fluttershy didn't seem fooled by my false expression, but she went along with it anyway. We dried her off and made her mane look as gorgeous as it normally is. Before I stood back up, I gave her a long and passionate kiss. She returned it, but she seemed surprised by it at first. As we parted, I tried to stand up, but she pulled me back down in a tight embrace. I could hear her whimpering. Matthew, she started, her embrace only getting tighter, and her tears flowing out faster and faster. I held her in my arms as tight as I possibly could. I didn't want to let go. Reluctantly, I did just that. I looked into her tear-filled eyes with my own. Come on, I started. I've got some friends who want to meet you. She couldn't stop crying or sniffling, but she nodded and followed me to the door. I opened it, and when we stepped out of the bathroom, I led Fluttershy to the living room, where her pony friends, Spike and the princess, were waiting for us. It's hard for me to describe what Fluttershy looked like as she laid her eyes on her friends. She certainly wasn't happy. She had no memory of any of them, and therefore she had no reason to be happy to see them. Yet at the same time, she wasn't surprised to see them all sitting quietly and patiently in our living room. It seemed as though Fluttershy was just in a state of shock. She didn't know how to feel in that moment. At least she was like that until Pinky decided to have one of her moments of loud, exuberant joy. Fluttershy, she cheered, jumping over to us and nearly tackling Fluttershy to the ground. Before she could do so, I covered Fluttershy with my body. I looked at her, concerned. She had been frightened by the sudden outburst, so I hugged her and ran my hand through her mane to calm her down. Hey, it's all right. No need to be afraid, I said quietly as she shivered in my arms. I looked back to Pinky. She was confused, to say the least. Sorry about that. It's okay, but hey, Fluttershy, it's me, Pinky. Don't you remember me? She asked. I moved out of the way so Fluttershy could look around the living room to see all our guests. She shook her head. No, she answered, still shaking slightly. I don't think so, she said afterwards, seemingly second-guessing her first answer. She looked up at me, her face filled with worry. Matthew, what's going on? I'd never experienced the pain I felt in that moment. The indescribable agony that weighed so heavily upon my heart couldn't be ignored. I felt myself on the verge of breaking down. There. I started. I turned away. My lower lip was quivering frantically. My eyes were beginning to fill with water. My heart was crumbling to pieces. And then I started to hear whispering. I turned back around and saw Twilight speaking softly to Rainbow Dash, seemingly nudging her forward, as if instructing her to do something. Dash walked up to Fluttershy, who could barely comprehend what was happening. Hey, Fluttershy. It's me, Rainbow Dash. Do you remember me? She asked. She locked her eyes with Fluttershy's, and then the shy and frightened pony became motionless. Fluttershy just froze. She didn't say or do anything. I looked at her, feeling sick to my stomach. Fluttershy, I spoke. No reply. I knelt down beside her. Fluttershy! Again, nothing. What did you do to her? I nearly shouted at them all. Stay calm, Matthew. She's remembering. Celestia spoke, as if trying to assuage my apparent sense of dread. It didn't really work, as I became more confused by her answer. Remembering, I questioned. Not a moment later, Fluttershy shook her head and looked around. Her eyes lit up with what must have been joy, and a warm, ardent smile appeared across her face. Rainbow Dash, she squealed, wrapping herself around her best friend in indubitable happiness. Rainbow Dash was quick to return the favor, holding Fluttershy in a tight hug. Fluttershy was crying, and as the two separated, she gazed around the room to see the rest of her friends present. Sorry, I just had an aneurysm. To see the rest of her friends were present. Girls, had I blinked, I would have missed Fluttershy's wisp over. What? Girls, had I blinked, I would have missed Fluttershy wisp over to her friends, joining with them in a giant group hug. I looked over to Celestia. What just happened? I asked. Celestia looked back at me, smiling. She's regained her memories, she answered. I took a seat on the couch and watched the reunion. I couldn't help but smile, as much as it hurt. A tear rolled down my cheek. As the emotional scene before me came to an end, girls started to express how glad they are to see Fluttershy again. All this was going on. Some old... Who are you? Oh, welcome back. Where was I? A tear rolled down my cheek. As the emotional scene before me came to an end, the girls started to express how glad they were to see Fluttershy again. As all this was going on, some old questions began reverberating in my mind. What made her lose them in the first place, Princess? Why was she sent here to begin with? I asked almost stubbornly. Everyone looked at me as if I had committed a sin. I suppose my wording was a bit blunt, but I needed answers. These questions had been locked in my mind since the day I first found Fluttershy, and it was high time we received some answers. I'm sorry, the princess replied. She was about as stunned as everyone else. Should I be saying every pony? I think I'll just start using that. I believe we were due for some answers, Princess, I said, deciding to take a more straightforward tone now. I needed closure, especially since the ponies were intending on taking Fluttershy from me. I see. Well, where would you like to start, Matthew? The beginning, if you will. Celestia nodded and looked at Twilight. It was the evening of my visit to Ponyville with the delegates of Saddle Arabia. As I had commissioned her, Twilight performed for every pony her new trick with some of Fluttershy's animal friends. Unfortunately, something went terribly wrong. Twilight's magic seemed to begin to fail her, and fearing the safety of her friends, Fluttershy leapt into action to try and save them. Twilight's magic reached a breaking point, somehow opening an interdimensional portal. Fluttershy was sucked into it and sent here. The portal closed before we could do anything. Celestia's explanation was a twisted version of the 5th episode in Season 3 of My Little Pony, although everything seemed to add it up, except for a few loose threads. Okay, that explains why she's here. But what about her being 14 years old when I found her? And what about her being unable to remember anything? And why is she remembering everything because of Rainbow? I questioned. The first two questions I cannot wholly answer. I would assume that Twilight's magic possessed a strange quality that digressed Fluttershy to an earlier age. It seemed that while her age was reversed, she lost all of her memories as well, at least the ones from after age 14, Celestia explained to me. Honestly, it made about as much sense as I expected it to. Please be quiet. Please stop! As for the factor of Rainbow Dash, I simply believe it was because before Fluttershy was taken from us, Rainbow Dash flew in to try and save Fluttershy. I nearly had her. I reached out my hoof to her, and she reached back. But I was too slow, Rainbow Dash interjected. It seemed like she was on the verge of tears. It was evident that her failure to save Fluttershy weighed heavily upon her. But this brought about a new question. How long has Fluttershy been gone? I asked. Celestia and the rest of her company looked around at each other. As Celestia looked back at me, a feeling of lightheadedness fell over me. 6 days, she answered, much to my consternation. I had to sit down. I was so surprised. I mean, in retrospect, it was probably a good thing that the ponies had only gone 6 days without her. Truthfully, how else was I supposed to react at the time? That meant that a year on Earth equaled a day in Equestria. I couldn't wrap my head around it. You couldn't possibly imbibe me with the ability to comprehend it all. I was so shocked. Fluttershy walked back over and sat next to me. She began trying to comfort me. Matthew, are you all right? She asked. I chuckled. Strangely enough, a tear ran down my cheek. I don't know, I said, beginning to run my hand through her mane, as I had done normally with great proclivity. I quickly found myself hugging her, not wanting to let go. She returned the hug just as quickly. As we parted, we looked back at the rest of the ponies and the baby dragon. I know this must come as a shock to you, but you have our sympathies. If there were an easier way to break all of this to you, believe me, we would have done it. Unfortunately, we were left with no alternative, Celestia said. I nodded. It's fine, I guess. I just didn't expect, well, all of it, I suppose. I mean, what would have given me any reason to believe that everything that's happening to me would actually happen? It's unreal is what it is. A fantasy that I always... What? A fantasy that I always to keep me going when things got rough. I was holding on to a fairy tale, really. And for a while, once Fluttershy was here, I thought I just might get that happy fairy tale ending. But I would always remind myself that something like this was bound to happen. I wish it wasn't so soon. And in a flash, I broke down. Tears began to pour from my eyes like a fountain. Left unchecked, I probably could have soaked the entire area of the couch I was sitting on. It was just at the realization of what was happening to me, an imminent threat that I knew was coming since the day I had met Fluttershy, had finally caught up to me. And it hit me. Hard. I didn't want to believe it. I truly didn't. But there was no dodging the facts. No dodging the reality. This was the way things had to be. Fluttershy soon began to hug me once more, wrapping me up in her wings. She started to cry as well, and I quickly returned the embrace. It was obvious enough that she didn't want to leave either. And could you blame her? After everything that she and I had been through, why would she want to leave? Why would she want to be taken away from me? Our situation wasn't fair, and I think Celestia knew that. While the rest of Fluttershy's friends began to weep lightly, the princess just sat there in a manner that mocked me. She made no sounds, made no movements, and just sat there. I wanted to say something to her, but I couldn't form any words. Fluttershy and I were still locked in a tight embrace, and I so desperately wanted to speak out against what was to come, but Celestia seemed complacent with what would happen, surely by her choice. She was going to take Fluttershy from me, and there was nothing I could do to stop that. If this was truly the Princess Celestia I had seen in various My Little Pony episodes and read depicted in multiple fan fictions, then I knew damn well how obdurate this alicorn was. Any word of protest would simply fall on deaf ears. Matthew, Fluttershy squeaked, her head still buried in my chest. I don't want to go. Now she was crying harder than me. I hugged her more tightly, any tighter, and she would probably suffocate. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Pinkie Pie burst into a literal fountain of tears. I saw Spike and Twilight sharing a caring embrace. Rainbow Dash was trying to fight back her emotions, while Applejack and Rarity cried quietly to themselves. Evidently, Fluttershy's friends were on our side. Obviously, the girls and Spike wanted Fluttershy back, and I truly couldn't deny them that. It was just the nature in which everything was happening. How fast everything was happening was just too painful for us. Finally, Fluttershy and I parted. I spoke directly to her. Fluttershy, I love you so much, I said. I love you too, Matthew, she replied. I swallowed. You need to go with them. Fluttershy looked up at me in shock. What? You need to go with them, Fluttershy, I exclaimed, almost a bit harshly. Judging from the look on her face, she could hardly believe the words generating from my mouth. Her expression wrenched in my heart. I could barely believe it. But no, you can't let them just take me, she protested. They're your friends, and Equestria is where you belong. Fluttershy, you're limited to this apartment here on Earth, and if you want to go outside, we have to deal with making sure you're hidden. And what if someone ever found you? Do you think I could deal with the consequences of that? I don't care about any of that, Matthew. I care about you. That's all I need. No, it isn't, I shouted, rising to my feet. I seemingly demanded every pony's attention, and rightfully so. I love you so fucking much, but you can't be with me anymore. Silence. A complete minute of silence. Every pony stared at me. Fluttershy was practically glaring at me with daggers. Spike made a coughing noise, but no pony batted an eye towards him. I finally diverted my eyes from Fluttershy and sat back down. But as I did, she got up. She walked over to Rainbow Dash. Before I could apologize, they were wrapped in a tight embrace. I couldn't justifiably stop it. I looked away. Just go. Please, I said. I shut my eyes and dropped my head, resting it in my locked hands. I heard hoof steps moving towards me. I looked up. It was Fluttershy. Oddly enough, Celestia was standing in front of me. I gave her a deadpan expression. I was confused, to say the least. Part of me expected her to rub it all in my face. Yet another part of me hoped she would at least try and comfort me. I got the latter to my surprise. In fact, I got more than I expected. Matthew, it's okay. Though I cannot directly relate, I do understand your pain. However, I think perhaps you might look at the positives of your situation, she said. No, that all doesn't sound too great. Just wait. Heh. Sure, the positives. Bite me, Celestia. You may as well be ripping my heart out and shoving it down my throat. Believe me, I don't want to let her go. If I had a say in anything, I wouldn't let you take her. Because I love her. Because she's so important to me. I'll let her go, I said. Celestia smiled, to my disgust. That's all I needed to know. Fluttershy, a word, please, Celestia said. Fluttershy looked over in surprise. She walked over to Celestia, who took her into the kitchen. They spoke very quietly. No one in the living room could hear a thing. I stared blankly at the rest of the group. They all looked back with expressionless faces. They seemed as troubled as I was, given the circumstances. A moment later, Celestia and Fluttershy walked back in. Fluttershy sat next to her friends once more. Celestia states, "We'll be off then," she said. I could feel my heart being twisted and contorted into knots upon knots. It wasn't fair. I started to cry once more. Twilight then stood up. I assumed she would be taking every pony home. However, Celestia stopped her. "Allow me, Twilight Sparkle." Twilight nodded and sat back down. "It's all right, Matthew. This will all be over soon." Celestia's horn began to glow. "Wait!" I quickly stopped her. "Don't I at least get to say goodbye first?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. Fluttershy looked at me with tear-filled eyes. Celestia chuckled. "You won't have to." And in a moment, Twilight's horn emitted a flash of light. The last thing I saw was a radiant smile on Fluttershy's face. I woke up with the sun beaming down on me. I squinted momentarily, trying to adjust my eyes to the change in lightning. I felt the ground around me, realizing that I was in a field of some sort. Finally being able to look around, I found I was on a hill, surrounded by nothing but soft, green grass. I sat up and looked out to the horizon. I saw an orchard of beautiful apple trees. My heart nearly jumped as I stood up and turned around. Standing in front of me were the girls Spike and Princess Celestia. Behind them, Ponyville. I was ecstatic, and at the same time confused. "There's no way. No, I don't believe this. Nope, nah." I was muttering like a blithering idiot. Every pony laughed at me and smiled. "Welcome home, Matthew," Fluttershy said, walking over to me. Ow. I looked down at her, and with the most ridiculous grin on my face, I picked her up, spun her around 5 or 6 times, and kissed her like crazy all over. "I don't get it. I thought you guys were taking Fluttershy home," I said, looking at the rest of the group. Celestia giggled and walked over. "That was the plan originally. However, I do not believe in destroying true love. I asked for a word with Fluttershy to determine how noble and true your love really was. Based on what she told me, I have no doubts that you belong here with her and the rest of my little ponies. I'm confident that you will be wholly welcome here in Equestria," Celestia said. I was addled to the point of retardation. In that moment, I had no words to possibly describe how happy I was. Of course, it will take some time for every pony to get used to having you here in Equestria. Considering that you are a foreigner of this land, not every pony will be as accepting as we have been. "That's not a problem at all. You'll see, Princess. Equestria is gonna love me." I was so excited to be there that nearly I forgot the repercussions of having left home. Wait, what about my family, my friends, everything back home? I asked. Celestia nodded her head. "Surely you understand how powerful my magic is." "I altered your world so that you never existed there," she answered. It was like something out of a comic book. Seriously, it's like when Doctor Strange alters reality to make everyone forget who Spider-Man really is. It was slightly baffling to hear, and part of me couldn't stand to believe it. Yet, at the same time, I accepted it. I mean, it was sort of horrible that my family had no recollection of who I was, but at the same time, it put my mind to rest. I'd be sad about it for a while, but I'd get over it. Besides, I was going to get a new family. I just didn't know it yet. "Thank you, Princess. This is just too perfect. I just wish I could have brought my stuff with me. So much coolness lost. Brings a tear to my eye," I joked. Celestia giggled. "Not to worry, Matthew. You'll find close to Fluttershy's cottage is a new home that has already been constructed for you. Inside, you'll find all your belongings, hopefully laid out to your liking, of course. You can change anything any way you like. This is your home now. It should feel as such." I let Fluttershy down and hugged the princess warmly. "Thank you so much." She smiled and returned the love. "You are very welcome, Matthew." We parted, and I looked back to Fluttershy. I knelt down and gave her a quick peck on the cheek. We smiled at each other for a moment, neither of us knowing what to say. "So, what now?" I asked. Fluttershy giggled. "I don't know. What now?" she copied. Rainbow Dash flew over in a blur. "Last one to match the places of rotten eggs," she shouted, and she flew off. I stood up, laughing. "Really? Still unoriginal, and you don't even know where it is," I shouted at her. Before I could say anything else, though, Fluttershy had already flown off. I sighed a happy sigh. I looked at Celestia, who motioned me to go. The rest of the girls and Spike had already done so as well. "See you, Princess," and again, "Thank you," I said. She smiled at me and giggled. "Go on now, wouldn't want to be a rotten egg, would ya?" She joked. I smiled and ran off to the others. Big time skip. I've been living in Equestria for a year now. As I write this journal, I'm currently sitting on the beach. Fluttershy is sitting next to me, helping me write. Twilight is reading in one of her numerous books. Ray is, I guess, trying to get a tan, which doesn't really make sense because, fur. And Dash, Pinky, and Applejack and Spike are playing in the water. The sun is starting to go down. We've been here practically all day. While every pony else was having fun, I had an empty journal to start writing in. And let me tell you, writing all of this has been a blast. Don't worry, my story isn't over yet. My story is far from over, in fact, because as long as I am here, my story will continue. The story of Fluttershy and me. Thank you, Princess Celestia, for making me not exist. That is the end of this chapter.
He should have been converted. He should have been like converted into a pony.
Mm.
Imagine like, it's just if being a human walking around as like the one human. It'll be like racism.
You should unmute Clemmy, by the way.
I should.
Sarah.
I'm not gonna.
Oh, come on, bro. Come on, man. We all want to about it.
What do you
There you
call
go.
it?
The second half of
Welcome,
the second half.
Ken Denchi.
I might leave you, to be honest.
The second
You
half
might
of
what?
this is
I'm probably gonna leave here.
Oh.
What? You don't want to hear the rest of the story,
Well,
Beta?
you know, I have things to do, like sleep, you know.
Beta, you don't want to hear the rest of the
Oh,
story?
no, I might unfortunately.
There's not that much. There's only an hour left of animated
Yeah, but-
time.
That said on about 2 hours.
You
And so-
could fall
well,
asleep to it, Beta.
Of course,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can't fall asleep in my bed. I guess we could change that.
One day in the pony world is a year in the real world, then after a year in the pony world, everyone is fucking dead.
Yes, that would be 365
5 days.
years.
Yeah.
So, what did Nep say after he left?
I don't know. But
You said
Wait, did Beta? Beta,
you
I'm
say?
almost finished with your OC.
I guess he didn't say anything.
I hope it makes me suicidal.
I can add the Beta's OC to my name.
No.
It's only 10 o'clock. Wow.
This is where I say goodbye.
No.
Oh, goodbye. Goodbye.
Right.
We'll,
Will you
we'll,
get-
we'll save the rest for later for you.
Wow, so generous.
That's just the kind of person I am.
You are literally the next Jesus. We can do it tomorrow, same time or earlier.
All right.
We will. We'll have to all wait for the amazing next
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, we can read the rest of it.
And then it'll be what's the other one, like Tortured Love or whatever the fuck?
It depends what you want to do. You can either do. I think the next one is Without You. Actually,
Oh,
it's
are
actually,
they like
actually,
are they chronological?
No. Actually,
So
Without You is an alternate reality where they actually have to separate with each other and continue on their lives without each other.
Also, the one thing I'm
what about-
confused about is he still a human?
Yeah, he's still a human.
Oh,
Yeah, Ryan, what's
that's
Tortured
lame.
about?
It's fucking lame.
What's that?
What's Tortured about?
Tortured Love is okay, he spends 6 years on Earth. And then okay, wait, no. Here. Princess Celestia doesn't let him into Equestria, and he just takes Fluttershy from him, and then he finds his own way into Equestria and tries to save Fluttershy, but
Is
Princess Celestia tries to kill him.
I was looking at the emotes, the gifts, and everything has everything.
mature for scenes of gore and
Excuse me.
This is kind of lewd.
Yeah, I know.
Squeeze the lemon.
I guess I'm gonna go squeeze the lemon. Guys.
See you later. Go squeeze a lemon and take the porcelain throne.
This has been Act 1. Be excited for Act 2 later sometime. Oh, boy.
Did I
So
even
when are these from? Like, how old are these? Like, what?
These-
Like